Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Ті, хто воде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Future
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1028 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And today we have very big news of Ukraine assassinating a high-profile Russian general, and also an emergency situation being declared inside of mainland Russia. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we've gotten major news over just the prior 48 hours that the Russian general in charge of nuclear, biological, and chemical forces across the entirety of the Russian Federation was killed today after a bomb went off outside of a building that he was exiting to enter one of his cars. It appears that the Russian general will no longer be with us, and of course this is to a great surprise and great victory for the Ukrainian side in the conflict. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear of major drone attacks striking within the area of Voronezh at this moment, as it appears that the Ukrainians are once again trying to eliminate Russian strategic targets within the region. Outside of this, it does appear that the Russian Federation, despite their attempts at trying to say that they will remain in Syria, look to be leaving, as we were able to get a large amount of video and picture evidence from satellites confirming that the Russian Federation is packing up and leaving, and it appears that they're going to be leaving for good, not allowed to remain inside of Syria, as it does appear that rebel forces are openly unfriendly, if not hostile, to Russian Federation forces that are still racing on their way to the port of Tartus in the airfield at Latakia to try and get the last planes and ships on their way back to the Russian Federation. Meanwhile, the United States may have conducted a drone strike against a official inside the Idlib government, as it does appear that a Ginsu bomb was used today in some sort of an attempted assassination attack. A large amount of information is not known about this at all at the moment, except for the debris is very similar to that of a Ginsu bomb that would be launched by a U.S. drone within the area. Meanwhile, outside of Syria, we have been able to hear that in the war in Ukraine, there's been a decent amount of interesting things that have been going on. For one, another Russian oil vessel has broken up in the area around the Krech Strait again today after a rough storm, once again showing that Russian vessels appear to not be as invincible and legendary as a lot of people would believe they are. At the exact same time, a national emergency has been declared around the Krasnodar region, as oil slicks are beginning to be created across the entire surface of the sea surrounding the Kerch Strait south of Taman, and we're also seeing that a lot of this oil is now making its way onshore, specifically around the town of Anapa. It appears to be covering the sea practically like a large black film, and not only that, is now covering the beaches as well. And now, with the third ship breaking up and sinking today on top of that, it does not appear that the Russians are really that concerned about the environment, which is minus karma points and kudo points for them, because you would think that they would, or something like that. You know, it just seems a little bit unreasonable. Nevertheless, it also seems as though the Russians really do not care about the North Korean volunteers that have been sent into the Kursk Oblast, as we have been able to get video and picture evidence today showing North Korean soldiers in mass inside of a emergency military hospital in Kursk after the failed assaults that occurred just a short while ago, around 48 hours ago. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are still holding down their frontline positions heavily, and we were able to get a decent amount of video and picture evidence of this fact. We were also able to get a good amount of location unknowns as well. But we have loads and loads and loads of video and picture evidence to cover tonight, and a lot of news for that fact as well. There is an endless stream of it coming out of Ukraine, really, so far today, and it does appear that we have a major piece of news that may actually have a pretty significant impact on Russian nuclear, biological, and chemical capabilities on into the future. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Going into the city of Moscow, we were able to hear that apparently something very significant happened today. Some people said it looked as though it was a very explosive morning in the Russian Federation, something that happens usually when Putin wakes up and hears that the war is still not being won on the 1028th day. But we were able to see that there was some CCTV footage taken from the surrounding areas showing something very interesting. Now, as we see right here, we can see this Russian general and his assistant leaving this commie block. At least we're assuming it's a commie block. And we can also see this parking lot out here. We can see Russian vehicles that are covered in dirt and gunk. And oh my goodness.
Oh, that's not good. Wait a minute, are you telling me as well the general lives in the commie block?
I think he does. I think he actually lives in a commie block, because it looks like a residential apartment building to me from what I can tell. So I guess the Russian generals live in commie blocks, I suppose. You would think
these commie blocks are getting pretty bad out here. Like, you walk out the door and there's stuff blowing up time you walk outside.
Yeah, and also, I'd like to point out that the one vehicle that I was talking about right here, I don't know what style of vehicle this is, but its car alarm did not go off. Every other car almost had their car alarm go off from an explosion, except for this one. Apparently, it's just simply built different. We were also able to get some CCTV footage from little angles away down the street, and it does appear that while the bomb may have taken out one of Russia's most important generals, at least in the nuclear, biological, and chemical sense, it also had a much more important reason behind it. Observe. It cleaned the snow off the cars. I mean, that was truly an amazing thing, like quite an ability that it has right there. And I think that they should put a Russian general on every block if it helps them to clean the cars off the snow. I'm sure that everyone's morning commute was that much easier because they didn't have to get out that little snow pick or whatever to get the snow and ice off of their windows. So what a giant help. But nevertheless, we were able to hear the information and the exact details about this guy. This is Lieutenant General Kirillov, who is the commander of Russia's chemical, biological, and radiation defense forces. And this guy is a pretty important guy to talk about. He's generally the guy who largely would see the Russian Federation operate in a nuclear, biological, or chemical situation, and largely would be in the one in control of making sure that nuclear, biological, and chemical protection protocols were followed for the usage of those sorts of weapons, and not only that, for the defense from similar weapons being used by other powers. This guy's loss seems to be directly correlated to the Ukraine conflict, at least to this point, as Ukrainian assassins were the ones who took him out today, but exact details beyond that point about why the Ukrainians went out of their way to target him was not really stated that much, at least at the moment, although we do believe that thanks to the loose lips of Kirill Budanov, we will most likely figure out that information in about 72 hours. Also, many people have been talking about what actually happened. How did this go down? Why in the world did Kirillov get killed? And it was a very interesting thing. You see, what happened is that it wasn't a car bomb. We would generally know that it's not a car bomb because, that's something that only, another group does. But beyond that, we were able to hear that apparently it was some sort of a plastic-like explosive that was attached to a scooter and then placed near the entrance of the building, so that way when the general walked out, the explosive would detonate on board the scooter, and then it would take out the general. Some people have been trying to figure out why in the world is this the brand new tactic that Ukrainians are going to use, but we've also heard others saying that it was some form of a drive-by scooting. Nevertheless, it does seem...
man, you pulled out the joke. There you went.
Yeah, I was waiting. I was making that whole build-up for it, but nevertheless, it is something that is pretty interesting to note, and also a brand new kind of a assassination tactic being used by Ukrainian SBU forces inside the Russian Federation. And also, for that fact, it is showing that the Russian Federation is not safe wherever you are. Even inside of the capital city of Moscow, it appears that Russian generals could be wiped off the map, literally by random at this point, as the Russian Federation doesn't really have the security forces, nor the ability to try and protect even their highest-ranking generals that have pretty important roles within the Russian Federation's armed forces. But nevertheless, we were able to hear that many people are speaking about whether the Russians will retaliate or not for the assassination of this general inside of Moscow. And it seems as though a lot of people are generally doubtful of that, and they're not really believing that the Russian Federation will have a very strong reaction to this at all. If anything, they might produce a larger drone and missile attack within the next few days or maybe the next few weeks, but beyond that, it won't be anything too severe or anything out of the ordinary. Nevertheless, a load of people have been talking about this, and Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think there's some major reaction that's going to be happening, or not so much?
All right, so it looks like 49% of the audience said maybe they might retaliate, but not in a very big way, while 34% said yes, Russia will escalate in a very big way, and 9% said no, Russia will call this one even and not do anything in retaliation. And honestly, on this one, since this was such a high-profile assassination, I think Russia will retaliate with something, but probably not in a huge, massive way. Like, it's not going to start World War III or something like that. It's also probably not going to trigger the launch of an IRBM either. There will probably be other things happening that triggers that launch instead, but it won't be this assassination that actually causes it to get out of hand. So I'm actually with the 50%. They will do something, but probably more on the sneaky lines and probably not something too bold. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I generally would believe the Russian Federation is not going to be doing that much in response, at least at the moment, to the death of this general. One has to remember that it is an ongoing war, and we have seen a large amount of generals come and go before this guy ever got a drive-by scooting conducted on him. With this in mind, I would generally say that the impact in the conflict, at least in Russia's retaliation to Ukraine, will not be that severe. They've already ramped it up to 10 over many other things, and to be entirely honest, on the scale of severity of what the Russians would react to at this point, this is a little bit down the list at this point. And I would generally have to largely also say that the Russians aren't really going to care about this too much. They will replace this guy. They're probably in the process of replacing him right now, to be entirely honest, and someone else will largely take over control of this area. It is one that largely requires a constant state of readiness, but at the exact same time, the Russians are understanding that nuclear, biological, or chemical warfare is not going to get used anytime soon in the conflict, so for this reason, there's no real concern of having to have an extremely competent person put in the position immediately, because it's not anything that is incredibly urgent, at least in the realistic sense. Of course, on a strategic level, always important, but on the actual practical level, it's not that urgent of a situation right now compared to everything else that's going on, including the massive oil spill that's now created a national emergency down in the Krasnodar region. But still,
and also, can you imagine, Enforcer, like the amount of fear that's currently running around Russia right now, with that general being taken out by a scooter sitting on the side of the entrance of his building? I'm sure all the other generals are wondering, how in the world was that allowed to happen? Nobody caught that. The FSB was asleep at the wheel for that one. And also, the other generals are now at risk as well. I'm sure they're very scared to go outside at this point, and they'll probably be basically holed up in a bunker somewhere, scared to come out.
I mean, honestly, they probably will, Maddie. I mean, the possibility of an active scooter being in any single building in Moscow at this point, taking out a Russian general, is not out of the question. The Ukrainians are showing at this point that their own SBU can quite literally get into the depths of Moscow itself and start wiping out Russian generals, which you generally would assume would have a high amount of security around them, but they have apparently none, because this guy literally just walked by a scooter sitting in the lobby, and it ended up wiping the guy out. I mean, I don't even know how much explosive that thing had on it, but it was a lot.
Yeah, also, I'm wondering, like, is this going to prompt the Russians to create an active scooter protocol? Because that would probably be the next best thing to do.
It probably will. I would assume that they'll probably have the OMON, which is their armed police unit, conducting active scooter drills throughout the entirety of Moscow in the preparation that a scooter might go explosive or rogue for that matter and start wiping out even more top Russian officials.
That's smart.
This is something we have to remind ourselves. It's a very big concern. I mean, with the amount of active scooters that are roaming around Moscow right now, you just never know what could be next. And many people are currently talking about maybe even banning scooters outright and talking about scooter control, at least at the moment, because we do know that this situation is most likely going to get out of hand because the SBU is quite literally just encouraging these scooters to go out there and do the best they can against the Russian Federation's government. We don't know what's going to be happening in the future in Moscow security-wise, but I generally have a feeling that scooters are going to be something that they won't be scooting on anymore, I would assume. But nevertheless,
Honestly, if they don't get a grip on this, they might see a large outbreak of scooter on scooter violence, which would be terrible because the Russian economy is having trouble. That's driving the scooters to get really out of control. But the scooter violence is really ramping up.
I mean, I'm telling you, man, and especially after the Ukrainians have been able to encourage some of these scooters to go out there and do absolutely drastic actions, you just never know what's going to come next from scooters. If you see a scooter on the street in Russia, you generally need to get on the other side of the sidewalk. You just never know if these scooters are explosive or not, whether they're going to lash out at you. You just got to make sure to take care of yourself and make sure to call your local police department inside the Russian Federation if you ever see a scooter on your streets. Keep our streets scooter clean and keep it but beyond that, moving on from all the jokes, this is stupid, honestly. Like, this is so stupid. We're sitting here making like a million jokes on scooters, but we can make an entire stand-up, I think, at this point, about scooters. But nevertheless, moving on out of this information, it does seem as though it's not going to create anything that major. We haven't even really heard a lot of official comments from the Russian Federation's government today, although Ukraine has already admitted that they were the ones who were actively behind the bombing of this Russian general. We, of course, I have to say, do not know the exact motivations as to why the Ukrainians took out this guy in particular, because there's a lot of other people that are in the Russian general staff that probably would be selected for an assassination attack as well. But for some reason, they went with this guy.
So the ongoing theory that I've heard so far is that this guy was in charge of creating chemical weapons, specifically the CS gas that was put on the front lines, and also allegedly he was in the works of creating another nasty chemical to put on the front lines as well. So that was the official reason that I've heard Ukraine saying they took the guy out, or at least alleging they took the guy out. So apparently it was because of his involvement with the chemical weapons.
Interesting. But the thing is, though, hasn't CS gas been around for an incredibly long time? I mean, it was around in World War I as chloropicrin. And then, the name evolved into CS. I forgot what the S stands for, but I believe the C stands for chlora something. But still, I don't really know why they would go after him in particular, because it's like, wouldn't you go after, say, like they did in the past, the admiral of the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol? I mean, that was an incredibly important and high value target to go after and wipe out. But this guy, it seems more like a minor person. I think, though, they may be just trying to instill fear, maybe, considering how these people are on the more so minor level inside of the entire Russian military apparatus, that anyone could be targeted and killed anywhere. Because if you're able to wipe out people in Moscow, because they wiped out a deputy director of a missile design bureau on Sunday, and now on Tuesday, not only are they eating the birds, but they're also taking out another Russian general. It's starting to show that anyone inside of Russia could become a target of the Ukrainian SBU, and the long arm of the Ukrainian secret services has literally no bounds. They can reach you quite literally anywhere inside of the country, or even outside the country for that matter, as we've even seen Ukrainian special forces inside of Syria, inside of Western Africa, even inside of Sudan at this moment, still actively fighting against Russian forces wherever they are and trying to inflict as much damage on them as possible and also thwart their missions around the world. So it does generally...
I think the Ukrainians were just trying to send a message mainly to warn Russia not to use more serious chemical weapons, because obviously CS is still a war crime. Like, even though it's not that serious of a chemical weapon, it just causes irritation mainly, and also a little bit of choking, but nothing necessarily deadly with CS. They're trying to warn Russia not to use the more serious ones, because apparently maybe Ukraine got some intel in the background indicating that Russia was going to ramp it up on the chemical front, and by taking that guy out, that was a pretty strong warning.
Probably so. We have heard, though, Matthew, that the Russian Federation's armed forces have put out a general safety board and notice to everyone inside the Russian armed forces that if you were to ever believe that you were going to be the victim of some sort of an active scooter, make sure to prepare yourself with the proper kind of personal protective equipment. And they have suggested this: a bicycle helmet. We generally do know that bicycle helmets will not protect you from an active scooter, but much like the Russian fallout shelters inside of Moscow, it is not about the actual effectiveness of the protective system. It is about the assurance that you will feel at least somewhat safe as you pretty much get evaporated by some sort of a nuclear explosion, or you end up becoming the victim of an active scooter. Nevertheless,
Also, $250 for a bicycle helmet. Like, what's this world come to? That's like motorcycle helmet money.
Also, I gotta appreciate Karen down here wearing the kettle helmet from the Middle Ages. Apparently, not only is she going to be wrecking the bike, but she's also going to be assaulting a French stronghold as arrows are raining down on her from above. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of this kind of a helmet design, because we all know that that will be effective not only in medieval siege, but also for your leisurely stroll on your bicycle in the afternoon. But moving on out of that and on out of Moscow, we have been able to hear of a declaration of a national emergency within the area of Anapa and Krasnodar. We have been able to see that oil slicks are being created along the entirety of the coastline as filmed today.
Друзья, плохие новости. Мазут
We can
дошел
see
до
the darkness of Putin's soul, also called oil, spreading out across the beach in the night's rays, I guess you could call it. There's really no way to describe the night,
вечеру
at least I can think of right now.
17 декабря 2024 года. С днем еще сообщалось, что мазут на астральном пляже не было. И вот смотрите,
That's bad.
к
Very
вечеру
bad.
вот он мазут. То есть
Very
это
bad.
не водоросли.
Long-lasting
Это-
bad.
это
Oh, and
именно
it stick
мазут.
too. Man, it reminds me of the tar balls, man, from the BP oil spill, honestly.
Yeah,
Шторм
the animals are going to
усиливается,
get it. The
усиливается.
people are going to get it on them, and obviously it does have that,
И здесь на
cancer
астральном
effect to it.
пляже
It's oil.
In other news, we've already heard that dawn ads are beginning to play across the entirety of the Russian Federation.
Пока что еще не сильно, но
Is that a chair in the middle of the oil slick?
происходит
Yes.
запах.
Huh.
Соответственно,
I guess it won't be using that then.
Well, it was an active beach up until now, I'm assuming.
Это вид в сторону лаунж-зоны.
That's crazy how quick it made it to the shore like that. Like, yeah, I thought it was a decent ways away from there, but it's pretty quick how it got there.
Let's see, how far away was it really? Because the ships went down about 40 miles away, so I guess it wasn't that much of a stretch for it to reach there in about 2 days. It was only 40 miles from the actual wreck sites, so I guess it wasn't that far. But still, that is pretty crazy to see it just spreading out like this. And we were also able to see another video made in the morning of the actual damage from the oil. Some of y'all would think that this is the ocean that's right here. No, that's actually the oil that is washed up on shore in Krasnodar. And it is endless. It's almost like a jelly that pretty much coats the entire beach. We've already heard that Russian arsonists have been out on the beach doing their part to clean it up by setting it on fire.
Was that a joke or for real?
It was a joke. Like it's
I was about to say, like, I wouldn't go and put it past them. Like, it was possible.
We've also heard that a random Russian called, let's see, I believe it was P. Diddlovich is looking for some sort of new oil source, and he's out there on the beach with a cup trying to scoop the stuff up.
Oh, that's terrible. Like, obviously, it's washing up on Russia's shores, so that's one thing. But at the same time, though, can you imagine the effect that's going to have on the animal life and sea life in the Black Sea? That's going to be tough.
Oh, local fisheries will be devastated by this for sure.
Thank you, Russia, for sending out a decrepit ship to leak all this out.
Man. It almost has formed into tar on the beach. Like, it's almost like an asphalt layer, which is really bizarre. But still, the national emergency has been declared over this, and while that's going on, a third oil vessel has now sunk in the area around the Krech Strait today, which we were able to see in this video right here. And would you just look at that, all that delicious oil coming out of another third oil tanker at this point that will now be spreading across the entirety of this area of the Black Sea, and once again giving Krasnodar another new layer of black oil to cover the beaches. What a wonderful thing that Russia's doing in this area.
And also, 3 ships in a row, like, that's almost hard to believe that's an accident with 3 ships in a row. Like, some people were speculating after the second one sunk, like, the 2 at the same time. They were like, how are both of these just sinking out of the blue like this? Obviously, they're decrepit, but kind of weird how it happened at the same time. But now a third one as well? That's just kind of weird.
It is pretty weird, but one thing that we do know is that the entire ghost fleet of Russian oil vessels like these are old, cantankerous, and they're not supposed to be on the open seas at all, for that matter. And it looks as though, since there are some rough storms passing through the area right now, the fact that they're not supposed to be out on the open seas is clearly starting to show, as these vessels are going down quicker than we could ever imagine. I mean, 3 in about a 3-day period. That's pretty much on average 1 oil tanker sinking per day at this point. They're not incredibly large. They're not the largest ones that are seen out there in the world. Most of them are the Volgoneft variety, only around 400 to 470 feet long. But the amount of damage that these vessels will continue to do as they sink every day is going to, of course, start to build up and become somewhat significant. A lot of people have also been talking about the fact that this oil is starting to wash up on Russian shorelines. And while we haven't really seen a lot of the southern Ukrainian coastlines in Crimea that are currently Russian occupied, we also believe that the oil may be spreading through these areas as well. This is all going to be Russia's responsibility to clean up in the future from this oil spill. And a lot of people are really starting to question the abilities or the care that Russia would have to actually try and clean up these sorts of oil spills. The Russian Federation has never really been one to be known to be concerned about ecological issues, as we have seen that they literally destroyed an entire sea called the Aral Sea, so that way they could grow some wonderful cotton within this area right down here, which actually still grows cotton to this day, crazily enough. You can actually see it just a little bit, but beyond that, it is something that we know the Russians will not care about too much. And a lot of people are wondering, will the Russians be able to clean this up or not? And a lot of people are leaning towards most likely than not. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so 87%, the overwhelming majority of the audience, said Russia will not be able to clean it, while 4% said I need more intel, and 6% said Russia will eventually fix the issue. And on this one, I am not very confident that Russia is going to fix this. In fact, I would not be surprised if Russia does not launch any type of operation to clean it whatsoever, because right now, Russia's at war, obviously, and they're going to consider this a issue of low priority. And even if they weren't at war, they would really take their time even trying to address this, because that's really not the Russian way to step in and handle issues like this. The environment's not very important to Russia. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. So now with 3 ships releasing this much oil into the Black Sea and tainting the sea, killing marine life, and also washing the stuff up on shore, I think it's going to be like that for quite some time, and Putin is not going to care less. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I do not believe that the Russian Federation will have the abilities to be able to clean this thing up or really do a lot of ability even trying or attempting. They do not have a lot of resources. They do not have a lot of funds. And on top of that, they're going to prioritize war spending over trying to clean up an oil spill. For this reason, I am completely doubting that the Russian Federation will ever be able to clean up the oil spill that has happened in this area, and it most likely will continue to affect and plague the southern coastlines of the Russian Federation and occupied Crimea well on into the future. Another thing that I've seen a lot of people asking, and I saw this very interesting question in the chat, is the Russian Federation, well, are canal vessels not really supposed to be at sea? And the answer is yes, entirely. They're not supposed to be at sea. There are certain classifications and designs that are built for open water travel through the high seas, and those vessels have to be built to a far more rigorous maritime standard. So once again, talk about that little joke skit that I showed you all a little while ago. And they're not supposed to be able to be designed where the front would fall off, pretty much simply putting it. While the front's never supposed to fall off of a river vessel either, they are built to be far less, I guess you could say, robust as their ocean-going counterparts, because the kind of weather conditions that you would see on rivers is never going to get as severe as the massive swells on the open seas. And for this reason, a lot of those vessels are just simply not designed for that kind of travel. They usually are designed for intercoastal travel along either rivers or very close to the shore, if they ever even break into the open sea at all. The United States actually has a giant system that a lot of people really don't know about, that was a project project of FDR's, I guess you could say, the New Deal programs back in the 1930s and 40s, which was called the Intercoastal Waterway. And I want to make sure to show y'all a little bit of this because these things are actually huge. This is a map of the southern U.S. Intercoastal Waterway right here, where you can see the areas east and west of the Harvey Lock. But this entire area, well, this entire green and red line on the map, actually is not in the open sea. It's actually a massive canal network that has been built behind the United States coastline, but inside of the U.S. coast far enough that it'll never really be affected heavily by storms. There are loads of these things, especially over the East Coast, and we do have a lot of pictures of them to show right here. This thing is 3,000 miles long, and this is the one that goes from Massachusetts all the way down to the southern tip of Florida, and then following the Gulf Coast to Brownsville, Texas. The entire thing is internally contained within the U.S. borders, and you can actually see right here one of the bridges that passes over a part of the canal in North Carolina. These things are huge, and this is where those river vessels are supposed to travel if they're trying to get long distance from one area of the country to the other, is through these massive intercoastal waterways. You can once again see another example here of a vessel passing through what appears to be some sort of a lock system, and you can also see another picture here of the large canals that were dug to be able to make this sort of intercoastal travel possible for these kinds of vessels. They simply just could not survive out on the open sea, and the Russian Federation understands this as well about the Volgoneft vessels. The Volgoneft vessels, for the large part, were banned from open sea service back in 2008, and these vessels are only supposed to be operating down Russia's major waterways, such as the Volga River, the Don River, among many other kinds of rivers. But specifically the Don River and the Volga, considering that that's really their main artery of transport and economic activity inside the Russian Federation. They really are not even designed for travel along the Caspian Sea, although it can be possible under fairly decent weather conditions. But once again, high seas travel is also fairly possible under good weather conditions. The problem is that in the open seas, there's really no way to escape bad weather conditions if they arrive, and there's really no way for a vessel to outrun bad weather conditions either, considering the design of these vessels largely relegates them to a speed of around 14 to 16 knots. With this in mind, the Russian Federation is putting these vessels out to sea, knowing that they're simply not designed nor capable at this point of any kind of open waters travel, and we're now seeing that a lot of them are going down in massive amounts. I would say that this probably isn't a deliberate act by the Russians to sink these vessels, because we have to remember that this is not helping the Russians at all to create massive oil slicks along their own coast and along the coast of the areas that they occupy. These vessels are sinking sheerly by Russian incompetence. They are losing financial and economic abilities with the loss of each one of these vessels that's operating in their ghost fleet that's helping them to fund the war in Ukraine. They're also losing a large amount of oil as well that could have been sold on a open market through the ghost vessels to continue to finance Russia's war. The massive amount of damage that's been caused to the coastlines and fisheries around this area is going to be plaguing the Russian economy specifically well on into the future. Nothing that came out of this is going to be benefiting the Russians at all for this to be a direct act of sabotage on their end. The only thing that this has done is screw the Russians over, and this leads us to believe that this is not any kind of sort of a devilish act of Russian sabotage. This is more so Russian incompetence, once again in its finest form, shooting themselves in the foot. But moving on from the talk about the intercoastal waterways and such things in the United States that we built to make sure that our vessels actually could travel around without breaking into the high seas and sinking, at least in those particular river-going vessels instances, we were able to hear that down in Syria, things are still not going well for the Russian Federation, and while the Russians have been trying to largely lie, at least at the moment, about their situation inside of Syria, it looks as though the reality of what they're doing is showing a much different story. But still, before we get on into that, I did see that Matthew actually asked all of y'all another question here really quickly about these oil tankers sinking, and of course, with another third Russian oil tanker sinking, a lot of y'all are really batting around the idea, is this sabotage or not? And it looks as though many people are believing that this is no way, shape, or form an act of sabotage by either. It is more so, most likely, Russian incompetence as a whole. But still, Matthew, what do we got, and what are you thinking as well?
All right, so I will admit the timing of this is very, very suspicious because 3 vessels sinking this close together, that is a bit odd. But nonetheless, there was a storm in the Black Sea, so that could be a main reason for it. But is it starting to look like Ukrainian sabotage? That's the question. So 59% said it's probably just Russian incompetence, while 24% said yes, it's probably Ukraine sabotaging the ships, and 8% said no, it's purposeful terrorism by Russia. And kind of like the enforcer was saying, Russia would probably not do this to themselves. That's basically who this is going to affect the most is Russia and having the oil wash up on their shores. That really doesn't help Russia in any way whatsoever. And also, they just destroyed 3 of their oil tanker ships, which is not very good for them at all either. So I really doubt it was purposeful. And also, I really doubt Ukraine would do something like this. They're not in the business of causing environmental disasters just to assist their country. That would not be something Ukraine would do. In fact, nobody would really do that intentionally because it really helps nobody. So I'm with the 60%. It probably was just incompetence, and they went into the perfect storm, and they got tossed around and they sunk. So that was probably just it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's sheer incompetence. Nothing about this is benefiting the Russians at all. Because if the Russians were truly sick and evil, why wouldn't they have created a major ecological disaster that would affect Ukraine's economy? This is only affecting Russia's. It's affecting the coast of Crimea. It's affecting the coast of Krasnodar. Both of those areas are Russian controlled at this point. It's going to have a massive effect on the Russian regions around here economically, as normal economic activities such as fishing with large commercial fleets or anything else for that matter that deals with the sea is pretty much going to be stopped for a while because of the massive amount of damage that this oil is going to be causing. The Russians do not want this. The Russians, on a governmental sense, are wanting to keep the economy as stable as possible. Something like this is an unforeseen consequence of Russian incompetence, and it's going to start destroying the Russians economically in this region, which will start to affect the Russian tax base and will ultimately start to affect Russia's ability to finance the war in Ukraine. With all of this in mind, there is no way that the Ukrainians would have wanted to sabotage something like this, because this may start to have larger effects on the entirety of the Black Sea, especially if it's not cleaned up. And another big thing that we have to consider about this as well is that the Russian Federation wouldn't have wanted to sabotage these vessels as well, because quite clearly, this is hurting them more than it ever would help them at all. So going off of that, this is entirely Russian incompetence that caused this situation. Once again, showing that the mighty and great Russian Federation, where the groceries are cheap, is once again screwing themselves over. And it's wonderful to watch. Not really wonderful in the ecological sense, but wonderful to know that they're just that incompetent. But moving on from that and out of the area, it is time for us to get on down into Syria briefly, because the Russians are suffering another blistering defeat of its own kind within this area. As we were able to see today, a Russian aircraft is finally taking off for the first time from the Latakia airfield, and we were able to see that today. Once again, to show you all down here, this is the Hmimen air base that the Russian Federation has been operating out of throughout the entirety of the Syrian civil war, until the Syrian civil war ended just a little while ago, and the Russian Federations were left in a country that didn't even exist anymore. The Russian Federation has been attempting to make a bit of a strong face and say, we're going to stay, we would like to stay, we're going to stay, because it's where we want to be. But it appears that the negotiations that have been happening behind the scenes has led them to see that they are so unwelcome in Syria, they are packing up and leaving at this point. And we were able to see an IL-76 today from the Hmenin air base just south of Latakia, taking off from one of the runways, being escorted by a Ka-52. The Ka-52's presence is letting us know that the surrounding area is hostile, and that the rebel government, or more so the interim government, may be so unfriendly to the Russians. The Russians have a serious concern that one of these aircraft may be shot down not that long after takeoff. But nevertheless, here's the clip. We can see the aircraft taking off as the Ka-52 escorts it. This IL-76 carrying as much equipment as it can back to the Russian Federation.
I'm not gonna lie, the helicopter escort's kind of sick with that plane.
It is pretty sick, I'm not gonna lie.
But you know, the guy, he's actually like sick there.
I don't know what's happening to your mic, man. I'm hearing everything you're saying, but you just sounded like you fell down a hole and I could hardly hear you.
That's not my mic, that's Discord.
Man, I don't know, man, because it literally went like this. You were like, wow, that's so cool. I mean, that aircraft could have crashed. I mean, like, just really... I was like, what the world is he saying? I was like, what's going on? And we see the Ka-52 turning off here to the left as the IL-76 heads to the right. Meanwhile, further south at Latakia, we have also been able to see that at the port of Tartus, hundreds and hundreds of Russian military vehicles are piled along the piers inside of the port as they are now awaiting their exit of Syria and the end of Russian involvement in the Syrian civil war, which ended, of course, a little while ago. For some reason, the picture is not loading, so we will refresh the page, and it appears that it's still not loading.
So it's not my end. It's on your end, man. I told you.
Oh, come on. It can't be my end. I mean, like, we're only replacing the computer, but here we go. We can see a load of Russian military equipment down here on the docks, waiting to be picked up by Russian merchant vessels that will be passing through and getting them on out of here. It's a wild and wonderful thing to see, just seeing Russian equipment piled up in the hundreds at the port, not left behind because the Russians simply cannot afford to even leave them behind because they can't afford to produce new equipment, and also they really don't have the ability to produce new equipment either. It is just something to see, y'all. It's crazy to see this sort of a thing. They are actively going to have to get the equipment back because they just cannot afford to replace it. And also, it is showing us that the Russians are practically abandoning quite literally everything in Syria at this point, as we already have seen that the United States, and have heard that the United States has occupied 5 former Russian military bases that have been abandoned, and they're already starting to move on in, showing that the U.S. plans on staying inside the area. Meanwhile, we were able to get some satellite pictures showing us the aftermath of the Israeli strike on the ammunition depot outside of Tartus. We were also able to see exactly where it was, so let me show y'all where that was. Down here near Tartus. It was right here. This is the former Bashar al-Assad controlled Syrian ammunition depot that went up like a nuclear bomb when it got hit by an Israeli bomb. We don't really know what was in here. We can see a decent amount of Syrian military equipment that even by this satellite picture standards looks to have been completely abandoned by this point. I don't even know if this base was being used much, and it also appears that there's a small hotel in the area. Actually, a motel, correction. And you can stay apparently the night at the place, and we can also see that the Municipal Department of Tourism is also right over here. It doesn't appear that it has
tourism's a big business in Syria. You know, everybody's just trying to get out here and come take a look.
Exactly, and for some reason, it's down in a shady place near the river. I think if you go to this marker, you just get mugged and shot. Like, I don't even think this is the Department of Tourism.
It could be the Department of Terrorism.
Probably so. I was about to say that joke, dude. I was like, I hope he doesn't say it so I can say it. I was like, dang it. I was like, he said it. But what else is around this area? What is this? It's a tourist attraction with a 3-star rating.
I thought I said a terrorist attraction. I was about to say, no way they labeled that in a terrorist attraction.
Well, you never know. I mean, like, he could be around these parts. But let's see here. What is around? Okay, here we go. We actually have a hotel and restaurant here. So this is a hotel and restaurant near to the area of the ammo dump. And I like the garden chairs that they have out here that were probably like $2. But not not a really bad place.
Wait. Take it back to the satellite real quick.
Yeah, like this.
Let's see satellite view. Yeah, zoom back into where we were.
Let's see, right around here.
Is that smoke in the sky?
No, that's a cloud probably.
I didn't know they captured clouds on the satellite. I thought they somehow filtered that out.
Generally they do. But sometimes they don't filter them out perfectly, and they just kind of leave it in. So those are most likely some sort of clouds that weren't really edited out perfectly.
I thought it was maybe like an ongoing firefight or something. I was about to say, look at that, a firefight on Google Maps.
Nah, it couldn't have been. But what in the world did Tartus Port look like when the satellite picture was taken? We can see the Russian little flotilla out here. Oh, look, it's an Admiral Grigorovich class frigate. I can never get that name correct. I can never say it right. But we can see a couple of Russian vessels here. Holy moly! Is that a Kilo-class submarine that they just had hanging out down here in Syria? What was the point of having a Kilo-class submarine in a civil war that was entirely land-based? I don't even get the point of that. I don't know why they had that there. But we can see also some freighters as well. It appears that business was booming around this area before the fall of the Assad regime. Oh, what's this? I don't know what that is. But we can also see, what appears to be smaller boats around there. And also a string. I don't know what the hell these things are. I don't know if they're boats or what. But they're, piled up all around the coast.
Those are the kilos that go on the Kilo-class sub.
Yeah, man, they're smuggling them into, Egypt or something, bleed. But still, a very quiet and empty port, honestly. There's not really a lot here. Let's see here. The Abu Mahmoud supermarket. It has reviews. I don't even know what that means. But no one ever left comments on any of the other reviews. What else is in the port of Tardis? Why the hell is Tardis the size of like an Arma 3 city, man? Like it's just big enough to be considered a town maybe, but not big enough to actually be a town. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just kind of really abandoned looking. Like even the port's looking abandoned. Everything. It's just crazy.
So let's take a look at the Tardis Museum. What is here? Okay, so it looks to
Nothing's in it. It's a museum of nothing.
You know, I was about to say that. I don't see squat. Well, we have this statue here, and do we
Not
have?
the best carving in the world, but good try, good first attempt.
So this says Roman period Aleppo. That's it. Doesn't tell you who the actual bust is or anything. It just says Roman period. So I could tell that as well. Thank you so much for sharing that info with us. It also looks like they held a rock concert here in 2018. And we can also see this picture was made by Mohammed yourself, and I thank him for that. We can also see a Corinthian column right here. A couple of sarcophagus as well.
It's Bashar's. He left it behind.
Yeah, man, this is what Bashar used to sleep in. Every morning he'd get up, he'd go, blah, 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 time to drink the blood of more Syrians, blah, blah, and then he just left it behind and left that whole shtick behind, too. But let's see, they have a vase. Dude, I'm not gonna lie, man, Tardis seems kind of uneventful historically for it to have been, arching over thousands of years of history. This is all they have to show is one bust, one slightly broken pot, and then a couple of sarcophagus. I'm not gonna lie, this place is kind of a little mid.
That vase right there is like the vase you'd see like a king cobra like wrapped around the bottom of it or something like that, and like one of those old timey like Ricky Tikki Tavi movies or something like that. It looks just like it.
Man, you sit there and pull out that little flute. They make the thing start dancing. I mean, like, I don't even, wait a minute, hang on. Hold up, folks. We have a train station here. I didn't even hear that Syria had a railroad network. Holy moly, they actually did. I would not ride on it, ever. Like, it looks, oh my god. Everything looks like it's abandoned.
Man, that's tough and in a bad way. Oh my god, what is that?
Brother, it's their commuter train or whatever the hell it is. This thing is hideous. Oh,
it looks like they went on Microsoft Word and like typed the number 8 and put it in the window on a copy paper.
Look, they got a Soviet era like freight locomotive down here. Oh my lord, and that's French. That's not even in Syria. This is the SNCF.
Man, that must have been a bad French era right there. That's a tough train.
Yeah, that thing looks bad, man. That thing looks like it go or something like that. It's like, he's rough. Oh my god. I think Syria's had better days. Are we living like in those days? Hell no, it was better back then. This is bad, like really bad. I got to tell y'all, folks, I think Syria was in a rough state. And also, look, the Department of Syrian Railways was right here. They're the ones responsible for it looking like this. And it's just bad looking down here. I would not ride on a Syrian railway.
Oh my god, man. There's no maintenance being done on this train track at all. This stuff growing everywhere.
You know what this honestly looks like? It looks like Escape from Tarkov, the game. Like, it looks that bad. It's like abandoned.
Yeah, like it's almost like Assad took all the money for himself and didn't spend it on the people.
Man, it's almost like he was like Abu Hassan and his 40 thieves around here, man. Like, he was just running around at Sinbad Restaurant. No way. Speaking of Abu Hassan, Sinbad the restaurant is here, and they're
It's got the same writing and everything.
It legitimately does. I'm not even kidding. This is crazy. They have French fries, like at Sinbad restaurant. Let's see here. They don't have a lot of pictures, honestly. They have like pictures of these meat scraps. This is apparently what came off of Assad's plate in the final days, but I don't know what else they have here on this menu, but that's still crazy. Also, why in the world is every single thing, Matthew, in this city? There's nothing normal. It's all government departments. Like, there's nothing else here than government departments. It's like the entire country is a massive bureaucracy or something like that. But anyways.
Yeah, I don't think you would say that business was thriving in Syria at any point, and definitely not now. Business is probably not thriving at all.
Apparently, the city was so violent and people beat each other in the streets so badly, they comprised an entire library about people assaulting each other in the streets. They named it the Hidden Library because people were hidden out there.
Oh, wow. The hidden library. I thought it said the hidden library. And the guy's face on the wall in the hidden library is literally Bashar.
al-Basiri al-Bashar, Wahmadi Sulami al-Basiri al-Bashar. We have to sing that.
They weren't lying, though. He was doing some hitting over there in that prison, like across town.
I don't even think that's a library, dude. This just looks like a cheap dollar store.
Yeah, really, it does. It looks kind of sketchy, actually. Now you zoom in on it.
Yeah, it's a little questionable. I guess people don't read around these places. But still, the vegetable. Like I could wander around and look at all this stuff. Honestly, I'll probably do this off air. But this is still a very interesting kind of a place. But nevertheless, there is a big question that a lot of people are asking. It has nothing to do with TARDIS the town and the weirdness of the place. It has to do with what's going on at TARDIS Port. And a lot of people are saying that despite talks with Syrian rebels, Russia has evacuated all military equipment to coastal ports, and a lot of people are putting in their thoughts. And it seems as though a lot of people are believing that the Russians are just leaving to play it safe. Some people are saying that the talks have fallen apart, and others are saying something entirely different. But Matthew, what are people saying about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like 54% of the audience said Russia is now leaving Syria and moving the stuff to the coastal ports to play it safe, so that way in case negotiations do fall apart, they're ready to get out of there. While 29% are saying that talks must have already fallen apart, and 8% said Russia is not leaving and it's all a ruse. And I really strongly doubt this is a ruse. That took a lot of effort and planning and work to get all of that equipment from all around Syria to the port, so I doubt this is just for show. They probably do mean it. And I think Russia is going to go ahead and get most of their stuff out because they don't want to be caught in a bad spot in case the rebels decide to turn on them. And it could be that they're figuring out the rebels might turn on them at any moment and it capture all of their equipment. So they're going to go ahead and get that out to play it safe, and I'm with the 54%. And I'm really not sure if the talks have fallen apart because we haven't heard that, but it is possible. But for right now, I don't think that's the case. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to believe that the talks have fallen apart. That's what I would believe. Because everything that we're seeing, it makes it sound like the Russians are really going to stay, but everything else that they're doing is showing that they're leaving, and they really do not have a choice at this point. So in my opinion, I believe that the talks have fallen apart, and the Russians are just simply trying to save face by making it sound like they might stay when they're actually in the process of leaving. Also, Matthew, I just saw something so interesting, Matthew. You know, they have different district names in TARDIS, like Al-Hamrat or Al-Hamrat, and also Aramul. And they came up with these cool names when they built up these districts, which look fairly new. Of course, you know, not perfect, but fairly new. Do we have it like, oh, wait a minute, we actually have pictures down here in these streets. Well, what does it look like? Can we get just a picture on the streets? This is like the best one we can get. So let's see what it looks like down here. Okay, so we...
Interesting. A picture of Bashar, of course. That's mandatory at this point. What's on the wall, though, over there? Like, what is that? Advertisements for businesses?
I don't know, dude, but, like, Bashar was literally, like, the Alexander Shannara of Syria. Like, his picture is everywhere. Like, it's on every billboard. They have a store called a Hashtag.
Hashtag. Also, stop using hashtags on Twitter, by the way. It kills your reach.
Really?
Yeah, Elon just said that today, so I'll never use a hashtag again.
Huh. We need to put the giant breaking in all caps with a little siren thing beside it. That will do it. Like, it's like... That's
it does it every time. It's worked for months for me, at least.
Dude, honestly, it's not bad. Also, we have this building is named the White Center. Don't know why. Also, there's a brand called 1970. Because apparently that was a year to remember. Hashtag
it says the good times. Hashtag the good times. Also, it has killed the reach, too.
Yeah. And then we have, let's see what else. Tito's. All right.
Flaming hot chips.
Oh, we have that weird-ass, creepy Russian cartoon. They have an ad for that. Let's see. Maggie Moon. Or Maggie Moon. I don't know.
Magic Moon.
Alanazeh. I don't know what that is. We have snacks. We have Madar. Madjar is apparently selling some sort of a detergent. We also have Raz. We have Chef Bakery, very generic. And then we have this that looks like some sort of an adult product, most likely. Probably seems very similar to Trojan. But then we have Cavalli. We have a load of brand. And then, of course, we have it all looked down by Bashar al-Assad, our hero in the legend of Syria. I wonder what he's doing right now. I'm sure he's protecting the Syrian people from their own free will. Oh, wait, he's gone. And also, that tie is tied terribly. That's shit. Like,
yeah.
that is a terrible way to tie a tie.
They did some mad Photoshop work on his face though, because like his pictures usually don't look like that. They look a lot rougher than that, to say the least. And also they put like that Disney magic sparkle around the edge of his. Also, they didn't even do like the stitching right between like the little graphic around his head and the other stuff. It's all like cut off.
Oh no, they did do it right. It's just that the little 360 thing kind of cut it off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it was done right. Let me go get a real picture of Assad really quickly to show y'all, because I want to make sure that y'all actually know what he normally looks like when he's not being photoshopped by his goons. So let me go get y'all a real picture here. This is what he really looks like right there. He looks like a feral ghoul from Fallout. He's not really a great looking person. So they Photoshop him up a lot to try and make him look good. But there's one picture that we used in a thumbnail a while ago that I really liked because he looked like an idiot in it, and it was just hilarious. And I'm trying to see if I can find it really quickly. Jeez. It's like they wiped that one out of Google Images. Well, that one's kind of close. You know, he looks terrible. I mean, like, you know, it's bad.
The chin line is not strong on this one.
Dude, look at this. They tried to, I don't know what they did here, photoshopped like a chin line. Like, it's like, what the hell is this? He's never
They
looked
shrunk
like
his
this.
head down. Like it's like they smashed his head like a smash burger or something like that, and like made it all like compact. That is not him. His face is long, like not like this.
I'm not gonna lie, dude. In this picture, whatever they did to Photoshop his face, his neck is insanely long. Like, he actually used his head like a mace or something like that, and like swing it back and get enough recoil force with that neck to actually like do some damage. Like, I'm not gonna lie, man. Like, now that I see that, I can't unsee that. But also here he is for real. That's what he really looks like. He looks like a mix of Benedict Cumberbatch and Mr. Bean. I don't know how to explain him, but he looks pretty rough. But nevertheless, moving on from that, though, one thing I would like to say is that moving outside of this area and moving out of what TARDIS actually looks like, they name all of these districts, you know, like all Hamrat and or Hamrat and everything, you know, like a pretty specific kind of a thing. But then apparently when they were designing another area of the city, they were like, okay, Brad, what design did you come up with? This one. Oh, okay, that's not bad, but what are you gonna name it? What do you mean? Well, you know, like we have like really good names like Hamrat and RML and you know, like stuff like that. You're gonna come up with something good to name this thing, right? I was just gonna name it the Sixth Project. What you can't do that. Like you gotta make it a name. Oh, well, I just thought I liked it. Come on, man. Like you gotta come up with something. Look, man. Like this is what I came up with. Screw it. And then they just went with the Sixth Project on like the 6th area of the city that they built. Like no creative naming involved. It was just the Sixth Project. They ran out of ideas at this point.
Yeah, it's a goofy name, but it's just very uncreative all the way around.
Like I saw Rolly Solo say they ought to call it Alhandrag. It would be similar to Hamrat. But nevertheless, it is a very interesting city, and it seems as though we've probably beaten the Syrian news into the ground. There's not really there's not really much to talk about down here beyond the Russians looking to be leaving, except for one thing. We did hear today that a Ginsu bomb was most likely used within the area of the Idlib government by possibly the United States. The exact information is unknown, but the remains of the weapon that was used highly coincides with that of a Ginsu bomb that would be used by the United States. These are the exact same kind of protrusions that would be seen on the side of a Ginsu bomb missile when used. You can see that right there. You can also see some sort of a English label on the actual weapon that was used, and it does appear to directly coincide with a special kind of Hellfire missile that uses these kinds of specialized blades to be able to cause less collateral damage when being used. We don't really know exactly at this moment if that was the weapon used or not, but it seems highly likely. Also, let me see if I can pull up an exact picture here and try and find that label on the missile 114R9X, and let me go to the images and let me see if we have a image here. Let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can get a good picture of this thing. Yeah, actually you can see the same warning label on the back of this one right back there at the tail fin area of the missile. You can actually see the exact same label that is right here.
That's a good catch right there. I think that might be it.
Yeah, so I think this is the exact model of missile. It was a Hellfire missile of the specific variant of the Ginsu bomb for the large part. So we found it, folks. This is it. So this was an American-made missile that was used in this area. We don't know who was the target of the strike, if it was even successful or not, but still very interesting to see. However, moving on out of Syria and back up into Ukraine, we have loads of video and picture evidence to talk about today in the actual war. But before we get on into it, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of questions from the chat, because we've had some very interesting kinds of questions thrown in. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so let's get some questions here from the super chats, and our first one is going to go to Brian Perkins, who puts in a very generous $50 donation, and huge shout out to Brian for that generous support, and of course, helping to keep the channel running. And Brian says, I really appreciate the time and effort that you both put into the channel, and I have a 10.5 AR-556.233. It's loud. And any recommendations on a suppressor for it? I also have a 16-inch Colt LE6920M4 for distance. Also, really nice loadout, by the way. And I will say this. First of all, thank you for the support. And I do actually have a suppressor, and I would recommend personally a suppressor made by a company called Q. And you can put this like threaded like end on the barrel, like a muzzle device. It's called I think it's called the bomb or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but it allows you to like literally screw the suppressor onto the end of it, and you don't have to actually like manually affix it to the end of the gun. It's really handy and convenient, and I like it personally, but it is pricey, kind of like all suppressors are, but that would be my recommendation. Check that one out. I think it's called the Trash Panda. I think that's the name of it. Kind of a goofy name, but it's a pretty good suppressor. But Enforcer, what say you?
Me personally, any of the suppressors that I have were custom made by a specific armory here in the area, so I can't actually recommend a specific brand or type of suppressor, because mine were custom made. So I don't have any experience with like suppressors just out there in the world like Matthew has. So I think that his recommendation would be the best, because mine just simply would not be good at all. Also, you have to make sure to check the specific laws within your state, because I actually found this out, Matthew. Suppressors are illegal in California, period. I did not know that. I didn't know that state law superseded federal law in that instance, but apparently they're just entirely illegal out there. I was like, that's a little wild. But
I don't think California, that's probably not the only state where they're illegal. I think they're probably illegal, I would imagine, in New York. I don't know that for a certainty, but there's probably other states where they're illegal. But yeah, suppressors are tricky because you also have to notify the ATF anytime you move with a suppressor. So it gets a little complicated. But if you want a suppressor, also I see some people saying, why would a civilian want a suppressor? For me personally, I put one on the end of my gun for home defense. So that way, if you have to use it in the home, it's not so loud, because obviously shooting 5.56 indoors is extremely loud. And also the muzzle flash from that is also extremely bright as well. So some people say it's better not to have a suppressor because you want to scare the home intruder. But at the same time, though, hopefully you're not missing like that where you have to scare them. So me personally, I say get a suppressor for that, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting thing with that. Me personally, though, I'll be honest with y'all, I'm not really a big fan of suppressors after having some, because of how suppressors work with the gas pressure inside of a rifle. It actually deposits most of the gunk that would have gone out of the barrel with the bullet back inside of the rifle, fouling it up and making it far dirtier than it ever would be in normal use. So for that reason, I'm generally against it, because yes, like suppressors are nice to largely dampen the noise, but the amount of additional cleaning that has to be done is ludicrous after using a suppressor. You pretty much have to deep clean them after using one, so I'm personally not that big of a fan of them for that reason. They are really cool looking though, and they also are great at what they do, but still I just find them incredibly annoying because of the amount of like gunk that they throw back into the rifle whenever you're using them. I remember one time I used one, and when I got done, I didn't realize this until I took the actual dust cover off of the AK. The thing was literally solid black. Now, what's generally the case with most AKs is that the gas piston is usually chrome towards the front end. I don't know why they make them like that. Someone probably knows the exact reason why they're chrome. But nevertheless, it's always shiny when you pull it out. Like usually after any kind of a like time at the range or anything like that, it's always still chrome. You can still clearly see it's chrome. And yeah, there's some like gunpowder gunk built up on the front of the piston, but there's still not a lot down the actual shaft of the piston. I pulled the thing out and it's literally solid black. Like it was throwing it back that much carbon deposits into the rifle that the whole thing was solid black at that point. And I remember that I was like, I'm not cleaning this thing. I was like, this is bad. I brought it to a place to have clean, and they were even like, oh God, this is going to be bad. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be real bad. I was like, that's why I brought it to you guys. And then they cleaned it, but I never shot anything a lot with a suppressor on it again after that, because it was just it was rough. It was bad. But still, anyways, with that, I hope that does answer that well, Brian Perkins, in case you're looking for something like that. But generally, with those kinds of AR pistols, you always want to really enjoy the loudness of them. You want to go into an indoor range when it's the most crowded and just, you know, just go ham with that thing. You're going to have everyone in there shaking.
In the firing range, by the way.
Well, yeah, in the firing range. Like, I thought that was kind of like known. Obviously, I'm not saying like go in there.
Just want to make that clear. You know, we got people, haters watching the channel. They'll be like, "Oh no, it's a threat."
Well, yeah, that's a good point. But still, go in there and just start going ham with that thing on the range, because people will be like shattering like their teeth from the sound. I personally know, because I've been in the range next to someone who had one of those, and I'd like, it was skidding so bad, I was literally jumping like that guy in the movie Glory, where he's trying to reload the gun, Matthew. You know that, like, the officer's going, faster, as he's, like, shooting in his ear, and he's, like, shaking and jumping and stuff. That was me after, like, 5 shots that guy did. I had to walk out. It was that loud, even with double ear protection on. I was like, my God. I was like, this is too loud. I feel like they ought to ban that stuff out of indoor ranges, like short-barreled, like AR pistols or short-barreled rifles like that, because they are way too loud for indoor use. Like, you just go deaf. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, Brian Perkins, and I thank you once again for the incredible support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to answer your questions. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And also, let's see, Raga NYC said, do you like wet or dry suppressors? Mine are usually dry. I never put any of that stuff in it to make it a wet suppressor, because it doesn't really work that long. Like, it works for a few shots, so I just generally run them dry, because they still largely do their dampening job. And anyways, I don't use subsonic ammo. I just used raw supersonic, so the dampening like qualities really aren't there. Like, it gets it down, I think, like 20 or 30 decibels. It's still so loud that you have to wear hearing protection, though. But still, I think it's I think I largely just run it dry, just kind of for the ease of use, because running them wet, like, the only way I've seen to run them wet, you have to like pretty much redo it every few rounds, and that's just too much for like a lot of shooting at a range like I normally do target shooting. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Hal Rose, who's a channel legend as well. He puts in a $33 donation, and thank you very much, Hal, for throwing in that $33 support. And I just noticed that Hal does a 3333 on, wait, that was 3 threes, I think. Hopefully I said 3 of them, but that's on fundraiser night, and he does a 3-3 on the other night. So he's always putting in those threes. I like that. And thank you very much, Hal, once again. He said, Enforcer Matt, what kind of allies fight each other? And pick a question, please.
And I thank you so much for the support. And Panama Floyd, I'm not really sure what countries you're talking about as far as allies fighting each other. Do you have an idea, Matthew? Because if not, I'm going to go to the default in my head, which is Turkey and Israel.
Allies fighting each other. I'm not really sure what that means. I would guess it means probably the Turkish versus the West, maybe. I'm not sure.
I'm not really sure, Hal Rose, because I'm thinking of a couple of things. Turkey and Israel, India and China, or let me think. There's not really many others that pop up in my head rather than those. So I think those are the only 2 I have. The best answer I could give is countries with differing interests, and their alliances are falling apart. Turkey used to be a pretty heavily leaning towards Israel kind of a country. They generally were heavily Western leaning throughout most of their history. Although I do have to give the caveat, Turkey has always done Turkey things, like invading northern Cyprus, which is still a thing to this day. And so while they haven't been entirely pro-Western throughout their whole history, they've largely been a lot more Western leaning than they are right now, without a doubt. And because Turkey's objectives are really starting to shift, their national aspirations are really starting to change, this is starting to lead them to distance themselves from the West. But under no mistake does anyone need to believe that they're going to start moving towards the Russian side. In the Turkish mind right now, at least on the government side of things, they're wanting to create a completely separate thing from China, Russia, or the United States. They're wanting to create their own sphere of influence that will be a force to be reckoned with just in this region. So it's going to be a regional sphere of influence, which really doesn't exist. Like, there is no example of that existing in the world right now. So the Turks being able to get ahead with this and actually succeed at that just simply will not work. There's nowhere in the world where this works right now. If you are a minor sphere, you are going to die. Like, that's just a basic kind of a rule at this point. Not to be like one of those people who are like, well, if you vote for a third party, your vote is wasted. I don't mean to be like one of those people on like a foreign diplomacy instance, but the Turks will get roughshotted by everyone. The Turkish mindset, though, is that by creating this independent sphere, they will actually be able to vie and kind of like get attention from every single sphere that will be competing for their, I guess you could say, attention at the same time, which is kind of an idea. I mean, it's not out of the question, but that's usually for ideologically aligned countries in specific instances. Like, for example, North Korea, which throughout most of the Cold War, Communist China and the Soviet Union were vying for really affection and more so loyalty from North Korea by giving them a load of stuff. And that's why North Korea was generally pretty all right, you know, or not that bad off until the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, and then the Great March of Suffering, or as we call it here in the West, the Great Famine, which ended up killing millions of North Koreans. That famine arrived at the exact moment the Cold War ended, and the Soviet Union completely stopped giving North Korea any kind of food aid. It also coincided with the stupid idea that they had in North Korea of trying to get everyone more meat, so they just let goats overgraze everything, and then a monsoon came through and pretty much just washed away all of the topsoil in North Korea, making the land literally unarable. They couldn't grow crops hardly anywhere, and combined with a complete lack of Russian food aid, a large reduction of Chinese food aid, and then the complete destruction of the North Korean agricultural industry, they started to starve. But beyond that whole like North Korean kind of like food history thing that I just said right there, this doesn't work in the kind of environment that Turkey is wanting to make it work in. Turkey is a Western-aligned country. If they want to do what North Korea did, they'd have to remain a Western-aligned country, and while they would create their own sphere of influence, they would still largely be Western-aligned enough that they may be able to get the United States and another major economic power in the West, like Germany or France, which they've actually done with the Germans in the past a little bit, to try and vie for their economic attention. But they're not that big of a country, and they're not that important enough. But what they're doing right now is that they're spitting in the West's face enough that people are actually getting tired of it, and we're starting to really distance them from us, and then at the same time they do enough to make themselves chum up with the Russians, but also be hostile enough to them that it's taken by the Russians as spitting in their face. Like, many people will remember the major diplomatic thing where Turkey negotiated the release of the Azov prisoners and then said, we're going to keep them here in exile in Turkey, and then Turkey said, okay, y'all can go back to Ukraine now, and then that pissed off the Russians. The Russians only did that because Turkey looked friendly enough up to that point, and then they spit in the Russians' face by doing that as well. So they pissed off the Russians, they pissed off the West, no one's happy with them, so if they try and create a minor sphere with the diplomatic situation that exists right now, they're probably going to just get shit on, like, endlessly by everyone around the world, the Chinese, the Russians, and the West, because no one's going to like them. No one will have had good relations with them, because in the entire process of Turkey trying to build up this little sphere of influence they have, they literally got on bad terms with everyone involved. So with that in mind, that's why they're currently doing this sort of a like hostile stance towards Israel, because in their mind they're still building this sphere of influence, but at the same time all they're going to be doing in the end is putting themselves at odds with the United States of America, because the United States of America is a hard-on ally of Israel. No matter the situation that happens, we are always going to back Israel, largely for strategic interest in the region, because if we can count on anyone, we know that Israel ideologically is surrounded by people who do not agree with them, and this naturally creates a country that really has no choice but to be friends with the United States if they want to survive, and also it makes it very clear for us to have a unconditional ally in the region. We have to be an ally of Israel's. That's largely kind of the thing that's going on in that that area, at least with the whole strategic side of things from our perspective. So with that in mind, we're not going to give up Israel for Turkey, because Turkey is a lukewarm ally and could be a passing ship in the night at this point and just depart from the Western world whenever they wish. So the only thing that they're doing by threatening the Israelis is most likely putting themselves directly at odds with the United States and making their departure from the Western sphere a lot quicker, and also making sure that no one else looks at them favorably. The Russians and the Chinese already have a pretty bad taste in their mouth on the Turks. The Chinese not as much as the Russians, but the Chinese will eventually find out that Turkey will spit in their face about as quickly as they did everyone else's. So with that in mind, I hope that answers that well, Hallarose, at least in that specific instance, as to why that's going on, because if those were the two countries we were talking about, that should be the general answer. If we were talking about India and China, there's a totally different answer to that, but still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Hal Rose, because if it was not for amazing folks like you who enjoyed this channel enough to support it and help it to be possible, we would not be able to make this thing a reality and keep it rolling nowadays. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
All right, and our last one here of the segment is going to go to Ambi Pambi, who puts in a $22 donation. And thank you very much, Ambi Pambi, for that support. They said, and now a message from our sponsor. Also, this is not a sponsor, by the way, just to make that perfectly clear. This is just a joke. They said, a small portion of tonight's live stream news has been patriotically brought to you by the ambidextrous Ambi Pambi on behalf of the LISAs and the SALs and the ALs and GALs of the LSA.
And I gotta thank you so much for the support, Ambi Pammy. And I guess that this stream is sponsored by the viewers every single night, just like you. And I gotta thank you so much for the support, because you help to keep these live streams ad-free and sponsor-free, and continue to allow us to cover the news on the stream the same way we've done for over 1,000 days now, which is really nice to say, over 1,000 days. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. But before we move on, I want to quickly address something that I saw. Is 420 said, I disagree, Andrew. The U.S. will side with Israel over Turkey. I think you may have misheard me, because that's what I said, and that's why I said Turkey is by default doing this, spitting in the face of the West and distancing themselves even faster than what they are already doing, because we're going to stay staunch allies of Israel. I actually explained why that is, because of the ideological differences in between Israel and the rest of the region. So no matter what happens, Israel always has to be aligned with us, because if things started to go bad in the region, there's no one for Israel to turn to but America. And in our instance as the United States, if our entire sphere of influence collapsed in the Middle East, the only country that probably would still remain aligned with the United States in a worst case scenario would be Israel, because ideologically they do not really align with any of their surrounding neighbors. So I hope I made that a little bit clear, because I don't know if I misspoke or something like that, and that's how it came out. But that's right there what I was actually meaning, is that Turkey is distancing themselves from the United States by trying to get into a hostile confrontation with Israel. Of course, we've also said on this channel we don't really agree with what the Israelis are currently doing inside of Syria at the moment, but still, when it comes down to it, while the United States can have major disagreements with the Israelis, or at least, in my opinion, we should be having a major disagreement with the Israelis about their operations in Syria at the moment, that doesn't mean that we can just cast Israel aside like we would with Turkey and kind of throw them to the wolves, because there's a much different strategic situation at play there that would make that not really possible. But still, we could try and, kind of move them back into Western, well, completely Western and American alignment with our vision and idea for the region. So that's what I would have to say, largely with that. But still, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support, Ambi Pambi, and everyone else who's supporting the channel and helping it to be possible tonight, because all of y'all make this thing possible. And with that, it is time for us to get on back into the rest of the news that we have tonight. Starting off in Voronezh, we were able to hear that drone strikes have been landing in the region, like this right here. Small arms fire was heard as the explosion now echoes.
Oh, блядь, the drones are coming back in, блядь, and we're trying to stop it with small arms fire. Not good.
Oh, yeah, bleh. And we can see this other person filming it.
The lawnmower. Oh.
I think that one got shot down.
Yeah, they smacked that one.
And that's seeing the clip right there, but Boy, howdy, what a nice thing to see. Meanwhile, we finally got to see what happened to the remaining North Koreans that ran off the battlefield the other day after their blistering defeat after an attempted attack that failed on Ukrainian defensive lines. We were able to see a mass of North Koreans. These people cannot be mistaken for being people from Siberia. These are 100% Koreans, and specifically North Koreans that are inside of a military hospital in Kursk after the failed offensive in the middle of last weekend. I don't know what's up with the oranges. I don't know what's up with this, but anyways, I like this guy's pimp look.
These guys look like they're in their like 20s or something like that, but they're acting like they're 90.
Man, that's how every North Korean acts, man. North Koreans have a weird way of acting almost like their life is over as soon as it's begun. I don't know what it is, but every time
I know.
Huh?
I think I know. Living in North Korea, your life feels like it's probably over before it begins.
Probably so, man. Like, you get born and you hear, another wonderful child has been born to the revolutionary zeal of our great sun-faced leader, Kim Jong-un, and you're like, oh, it's over. Like, it's over. Pack up the bags. We're done. Might as well not even care. This is a wasted one. But anyways, moving on from that and into the clips that we actually got from Kursk today, we were able to see that the Ukrainian defense is still holding on strongly within the region, as the 1st Mechanized Brigade was able to knock out some Korean soldiers using kamikaze drones. We see right here a buildup of North Korean soldiers, and it appears that they're bringing it on down, and boof, and they got him. And this little red circle right here. Red circles are always helpful.
Man, they've whipped out the Microsoft movie maker transitions with this one.
Man, they really have, man. They've pulled out like the whole 9 yards. Also, I just saw something really quickly. Let's see. Hang on here. oh man, I just saw John Barley bring up something. Yeah, he completely fell off with extra relish. Also, I saw someone else say really quickly in the chat, this was an interesting one. Someone said, well, technically Israel and Syria are still at war. I don't know where the chat went. I'm trying to look for it. But I'm going to address your chat because I saw some. Technically, Syria and Israel are still at war, so an Israeli land grab is legit. That's not the case, because the war that existed in between Israel and Syria was a war in between Israel and the Syrian Arab Republic. At this time, the Syrian Arab Republic has ceased to exist as a country and has been defeated by external forces outside of Israel. For this reason, Israel is not pushing into Syrian Arab Republic land and taking ground. They are actually pushing into Syrian interim government territory, which is a brand new country, and taking their ground instead, while officially not being at war with that country. Because the interim government did not inherit the war in between Syria and Israel. They've inherited nothing from the former Syrian Arab Republic. They haven't inherited debt. They haven't inherited anything, because the Syrian Arab Republic quite literally ceased to exist. It is no longer, and there's no inheritor country to what the Syrian Arab Republic was, or anything else for that matter. They're just completely gone, and this is a brand new country as far as diplomacy is concerned that now exists pretty much in the area that the Syrian Arab Republic once did. So that's kind of the difference. I get where you're coming from with that, because technically, yes, like if they just started the war again up at any moment, they would have been ending their ceasefire with the Syrian Arab Republic, but they would be able to take territory. However, the situation is different. But we can see here the 36 Marines also doing their job within the area of Kursk, taking out more Russians.
Oh, I like this. Corsair F4U put in a political science question. I love it. Thank you for that support, by the way.
Thank you so much for the support, by the way, as well, Corsair F4U. Great plane, by the way. And also, Matthew will love to answer that question. It's a pretty good one. And we see here the drones of the 36th surveying the battlefield, looking for any potential targets that may be destroyed. We can see that they may have found a burnt-out Brem, a burnt-out BMP-3, and it looks as though a couple of additional... that might be a BMD-2. Couldn't really tell. That looks like a destroyed car of some sort. We can also see a pickup truck destroyed, as well as a main battle tank. That looks like another BMD. That is another BMD. Holy moly. This must, I don't know what these are from. I'm guessing maybe the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade, because there's an insane amount of BMDs out here. It's either an airborne unit or it's the Naval Infantry Brigade. I'm not exactly sure which it would be at the moment. Also, some of y'all may be realizing that I sound a lot more chipper and excited tonight. That's because, Matthew, I found out what the problem was. I was not getting enough coffee.
So in other words, you've gone caffeine overdose, and that's what's helping?
Yes, it is helping tremendously. It's helping to keep the headaches away, which I think are from caffeine withdrawal. And I think it also was the reason why I wasn't as chipper, is because I was not energetic enough, and I was just feeling worn out and tired every time I was getting on the show, because I was feeling that, and I was like, dang, am I just like getting worn out from everything, or am I not getting enough coffee? And I think the answer is not enough coffee.
Interesting. I actually had my shot of espresso earlier than usual, and I'm realizing I cannot do that as much as I would love to do that, because it's actually wearing off a lot quicker, and I'm realizing that right now. I'm like, that's weird. I feel like I'm getting tired all of a sudden, and I'm like, okay, it's that hour early espresso shot that did it.
Man, honestly, man, I just started drinking cold brew, no sugar, no cream, just like tank that stuff and get to it, man. Like, it's a tough world out there, and we got to be tougher. Like drink the most bitter coffee imaginable.
It's kofefe.
I mean, you see that the 36th Brigade is still observing the destruction of Russian vehicles in the Kursk region. We can see that a load of destroyed APCs exists in front of their positions. Once again, more cars also destroyed as well. Cars have become a backbone of Russian logistical and really transportation abilities beyond the logistical capacity, even just for fighting troops. Oh my lord. I don't know what happened to this tank, Matthew, but do you see this? The track segments are literally sitting right side up, like about 30 feet away from each other, so the entire tank in the middle of the thing just got blown up, and the only thing that exists is the suspension and track links of the once former tank.
It's weird. It looks almost like they uncovered fossils or something of like an old tank, like from prehistoric times, the way it's like sitting in the snow like that, and also sideways. But yeah, it's weird.
Here we can see the ancestors of Russians gone before.
Like a cute Jurassic Park or something like that. Oh, and what's this?
Oh, look at that. It's a truck.
Desert Cross. It's a Desert Cross, I think.
Why is there a track link underneath it?
I don't know. Oh, wait a minute. A tank apparently got blown up somewhere around here.
This is pure carnage out here. Like, these guys got wrecked.
Man, wrecked, destroyed. It's terrible.
Just a tour of the battlefield, I guess, just giving us like aerial Ukraine.
Man, in the future, thousands of years later, if these tanks aren't recovered, they'll be buried under like, a good 20 feet of ground, and someone will dig them up, and you'll have like a future historian. They'll be going on like their TV channels or whatever they have at that point. What was this? Was it ancient aliens? Or was it some sort of ritual sacrifice to the gods? Or something like, it'll be something stupid. I think they'll have a whole bunch of people that look weird and like they have like a comb stuck in their hair. They'll be like, it's aliens or something like that. It'll be something goofy.
You got to get the technique down right, though. Could it be that this is the remnants of an alien species? Could it be?
Man,
but first of all, let's go to our Tide Pod commercial real quick.
Man, but like they'll sit there, man, they'll always leave you on a cliffhanger every 5 minutes, because the ad segments are like 10 minutes long, and the actual like segments of the documentary are only like 5. So you get like 10 minutes of ads to get back to them going, look at these rocks within this ancient village. They appear to have been cut well, too well. Could it have been? And then they do like these ultra stupid like camera frame changes with like lens flares, and they're like, ancient aliens, and then it goes right back to a commercial break again. You never get the answer in those documentaries. Like, they always just like say the stupidest, like they'll sit there and go to a British town, or better yet, they'll go to Oxford University, which is like 1,000 years old now, and they'll be like, Oxford University is built with symmetry, maybe too much symmetry. Could it have been that they got influence from a world beyond? And then it goes straight to ad break instantly.
Also, they'll bring in these experts that you've never heard of before. So I've never even heard of these people that are allegedly experts, and they'll literally bring them in and have them read off a teleprompter like something that's dramatic sounding. It's like these guys are so like much of an expert that they have to read off a teleprompter and act like they're just voicing it like a voiceover. It's like it's just so obnoxious. Like those shows are just like honestly, they're not very smart. Like I've watched them a couple of times. I'm not gonna like dog on people that's watched them, but it's not exactly what you'd call good education when it comes to stuff like history.
Oh yeah, man. And then everything has to have like this false sense of drama thrown into it. Like I think people would just be happy with like a little infomercial, like because for some reason we've had the Smithsonian Channel on these days. I don't know what it is, but Smithsonian Channel is like me, obsessed with trains. So just about every single documentary on the Smithsonian Channel is about trains, but they make it so much more dramatic than it needs to be. Like they'll be like, this train is traveling down the railroad at 15 miles an hour, but at any moment it could spell disaster. And then they'll bring you through like a 1 in a million scenario where like the engine explodes on the train, it runs out of control downhill, gets up to a speed of 100 miles an hour, jackknifes off the rails, and kills everyone on board. And then they'll be like, luckily it's only traveling at 15 miles an hour, and there's a 1 million safety procedures that have completely made this impossible. And it's like, why even bring it up then? Like, just tell us how it works. Like, I just be interested in hearing about it without all the unnecessary drama. I don't know about y'all, but I feel like it's kind of overdone these days. But also, by the way, we can see some archival footage here of the 82nd Airborne pushing into Kursk in the opening days of the offensive.
Just setting these buildings ablaze, man. These tracers are coming in fast.
Man, look at that German martyr down there, man.
Tearing right through that wall.
German vehicles in Kursk? I've seen this before. Geschlägt verlag man in die Deutschen. But anyways, we can see the Ukrainians interviewing here as they're talking about the offensive.
Mr. Zelensky, tear down this wall.
I would like to tear down the wall and give the Russians a chance to see the real forces, the long-lasting forces of the Ukrainian army.
Come on, Nancy, we're leaving.
Oh, Nancy, I can see it now. In the future, after the wall comes down, the Russian Federation will start invading their own people. They'll be like real sons of bitches, just like they were in the Cold War, Nancy, but only smaller and weaker. It's literally it's a prophecy foretold. Someone asked, is that a prison? No, that's just a Russian neighborhood. Easily mistaken. And we could see here that they're just ramming the martyrs straight through the walls. I honestly do not know what this compound is. I'm doubting it's a prison, but we now see this guy called Kaban talking.
Is this the wall breaker?
I don't know.
Oh my God, he's tearing the building down.
Oh my lord, dude, he rammed the martyr into it.
This guy's just a rogue out here running into everything.
And we can now see the end of the clip come upon us. I was very confused there. I was like, that's a really still video. But moving on from that and into our location unknowns, we were also able to see the drone operators of the 22nd Mechanized Brigade. What a clean-looking armored car. That thing looks clean. I'm not going to lie. Like, I was like, that paint job on an armored car, mwah. Perfection, man.
Pretty sick. I like it, man.
Also, we can see this guy here using a bullpup shotgun. We can also see this guy here looking like some sort of an operator from Rainbow Six Siege holding a drone. We can also see this guy here operating the drone, and those are the end of our pictures, but still really neat. Meanwhile, moving on to our next clip, we also got to see a view of a helicopter pilot conducting a combat mission. Check this out. This is actually the inside view of an Mi-24, and he also has this little buddy behind him, the emotional support pilot. Hello! And so he's tilting up. He fires off the rockets.
That guy in the back looks like he might be hitchhiking or something. He doesn't even look like he belongs in there.
I don't even know what he's doing in there, because that's the rear compartment of the Mi-24 where it can carry a little bit of infantry. So this is, I believe, the pilot's cockpit right here. The gunner is in front of him in the other bubble on the front of the Mi-24. So I don't know what this guy is doing back here. He's just back here, dude, like, he's behind him in his ear saying, "You can do it, man. You believe in yourself. You can do it." Like, and that's just what he does, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what his job is. But we now
I'm going to bring my son and my boy out here today to take a look at this work.
Dude, when he's flying back, he's like, "See, that was really cool, wasn't it, son?" And then the kid under the helmet back there is like chewing on like the little microphone. Yeah. And then he's like, "Yeah, it was great, wasn't it?" You know, something like that.
You see, though, the father needs to get some braces or something. His teeth are a little out of whack.
Man, I'll tell you, man, this guy could rip into a steak. I mean, you know, something like that. He'd be going crazy. And now they're getting on out of there. And that's the end of the clip. But still, it was a really cool one and pretty funny to just see that random guy hanging out in the back. Also, we got to see this operator here holding this muddy Barrett Imrad. These things are like 15 grand, so I kind of weep when I see one covered in mud, considering that in the normal world, these are considered like godlike by people who can actually afford to own one. I'm not one of those people, but still, it is pretty neat to see one. But moving on from that and on to the next picture, we also got to see a Rosamac back in the day. This is most likely archival footage because of the foliage. But we got to see a Rosamac using a very rare airburst round on his 30mm main gun. This was incredibly cool, so check this out. We can see the Rosamac firing here from this opening, and we can see the rounds actually detonating above the trees. I've never seen airburst rounds used before from a Rosamac in the war, but it is really cool to see. They just rain shrapnel down onto positions from above, so it's pretty wild to see that.
That's pretty crazy. They got a lot of rounds in there, too. Oh, look at that.
Oh, those bounced off
they
the
deflected
ground.
them off the ground?
Yeah, they're bouncing off the ground and exploding above the trees. I don't even know if the shrapnel's reaching the trees at that point. But it looks like they adjusted and they're now starting to land back towards the tree line again. I think they may have moved the vehicle then and then gotten the gun uncalibrated, so then had to get the laser rangefinder back on target right there. I think that's what happened. But anyways, that's the end of the clip. Still interesting to see. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a little bit of air defense training as well. Now, this was really cool. This is a 23mm autocannon mounted onto the back of a Humvee that's being used in air defense somewhere. We don't know where specifically, but this is probably one of the coolest Gush gun loadouts I've ever seen so far in air defense training. But anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit and into the Russian casualty report, because this is incredibly cool.
Oh no, man, they got 0 Bobcats today. That's a damn shame right there. But it looks like the troop losses have gone back up and the other losses are creeping up as well. And also, before anybody mentions it, I think yesterday was 2 Bobcat losses on Monday's report. Sadly, we don't cover on Tuesday, but it was 2. So a big yeehaw for that.
I'm not gonna lie, people get emotionally invested into those casualty reports for the Bobcats, because whenever they hear you, man, they go, "Oh man," everyone's like, "Go to yesterday, there was one, don't cry," or something like that. Like, people get seriously emotionally invested in them. But still, Miss Disa, the keeper of the record, said that 1,600 troops is the 17th highest daily loss of the war, which doesn't sound that high, but this is still incredibly high. The North Koreans may have some impact on the slight increase in the 7-day average. We are believing that they probably are accounting for about maybe 100 or 200 of those losses, at least in fatalities. We don't know how many were wounded, but still, 1,600 Russian soldiers and North Koreans were wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 15 APCs, 70 supply trucks, 4 main battle tanks, 8 artillery pieces, 34 drones, and that's it. But it was still a pretty good loss day. It looks as though the Ukrainians are holding the line well and inflicting high casualties onto Russian forces. Meanwhile, in the Kupiansk area, we were able to see some Russian assaults getting hit by the 77th Air Mobile Brigade in the Kupiansk-Vostlovki front. Whoa, they got that Michael Bay music playing right here. Oh, they hit it dead on the nail right there.
Can we zoom in on that, Jamie?
And they did.
Look at that.
Wow, they really did. Like, dang. Oh,
Jamie, I said zoom in, don't blow it up. Look at this. Land now, it says. All their drones say land now.
Man, and they land them. They listen, apparently. Oh, that looks like it hit right on the cage over the tank. It looks like a fire actually started from it as well.
Landed right on that Russian's head.
Ooh, that looks like an ammo detonation right there, Matthew. Why, holy moly. Well, that thing's cooking. Do you smell what's
finished.
cooking?
What's cooking, by the way?
Nothing. Get to it.
Oh, damn.
I'm just kidding, man. I'm just playing with you. But we can see all of these Russian vehicles burning on the tree line. And, oh, buddy, what a day it's been for them. Not a good one, but it's been a day for sure. And that's the end of the clip right there. Very interesting to see. And moving on from that and down the line into the area of some more Russian forces getting destroyed, we were able to see right here in Osa getting knocked out. Look at this. Well, they got some dramatic music playing over this.
That's like that music that hits you in the feels and stuff.
Man, that's the music they play when you're running home in the movie, and you hear that your like older brother passed away or something in a fire, and you're like, oh no, and then they start playing that dramatic music. It's something like that.
That's like that Lifetime movie music they start playing when the drama starts.
Isn't that the music that they played when that guy in the Squid Game movie lost let's see. What was it, man? He lost his daughter or something to his wife. His wife, like, took his daughter or something like that. And he went walking home. And he was like, I have nothing left in life. And then that stuff was playing. You know, like, you remember that, right?
Maybe.
And then they approached,
somewhat.
And then they approached him. They were like, would you do questionable things to a squid for some money? And then he was like, sign me up. And then, you know, the whole, like, plot began there. But anyways, moving on from that and down to the Seversk area, we were able to see that they were hitting some Russian positions in this area as well. And here's the clip. Dashing through the snow in my crappy winter smock. I hate this little trench. It's filled with nasty dirt. I like to eat pig snout. I don't know what's going on. Is that the Ukrainian battle tank is running on my trench? Oh, jingle bells, jingle. Oh my god, it actually was a Ukrainian tank. I thought it was about to be a Russian one. They just obliterated all those guys in that dugout. Wow, I guess you could say that they're jingling their bells.
Man, Ukraine came in like the Grinch and said, I'm going to ruin Christmas this year.
Man, and he got a wicked smile, a smile so wicked. And then they just slammed a 125mm HE round right into the opening of that trench.
Honestly, I can't remember if the Grinch spoke. Like, I just imitated the Grinch, but I can't remember the Grinch ever speaking at any point.
The Jim Carrey one spoke. I don't think the animated one ever spoke. I just think he had that guy, like the professional hater, just diss tracking on him every single time he showed up. Like, I would be angry too if there was just some non-corporeal voice out there in the world going, "You're a piece of shit, Mr. Grinch." I'd be like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, what are you picking me out for? There's a load of assholes, like, out here. Why you gotta pick me? Just because I'm green? Is it because I'm green? You greencist? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why you gotta pick on me? I'm just here with my dog, just chilling in this cave. My life's misery. No one likes me because I'm green. Like, it's bad to be green, I guess. Like, you know, like, it's terrible. Like, why are you beating me up? It doesn't make any sense. But anyways, moving on from that and into Touretsk, we did get to see the Russians apparently having a very bad day in Touretsk after their building got mined again, and the Ukrainian petard crews took it down.
They're getting pretty frequent with these building demolitions like this. Pretty risky, too, for them to be pulling this off all the time.
Man, and they are doing great work with this stuff. I mean, they literally just blast the thing away. Also, Nicholas Condor said the animated Grinch did speak. Which one? The new one or the old one? Because I haven't ever watched the new one. I know that they had that pistachios ad that said something like salty just like my nuts. And it was like selling pistachios, which was really weird and very sexual for pistachios to just be pistachios. I don't get what was going on with that. But I don't know, but beyond that, I've never watched that one. I watched the old one though, like the one that was hand drawn, animated. So I don't know if that one talked or not. Tell me if that one did. If you're talking about that one, thank you. If you're talking about the modern one, I've never watched the modern one. But we also got to see the 42nd Mechanized Brigade providing some fire support. And also, Monster Live said, "What brand of coffee did you drink today?" I drank Stoke, specifically the purple kind. I don't know what it's called. I just know it's Stoke Purple.
That purple drink.
What did the old Grinch sound like? Everyone's saying that the old Grinch talked. I don't remember him talking. I just remember him being a mute and being dissed on the whole movie.
I can't remember him talking at all, really. If he said anything, I wasn't listening.
Man, he just walked. You know what? I gotta pull up that that ad thing that he did with the new animated Grinch. Here it is. I found it. I'm not kidding y'all. Like, y'all think I'm coming up with that, and it just sounds like it's too far. It's real. I'm gonna have to pause this video here to show y'all this, because I remember seeing this, and it was at, I think, like, Walmart or Publix, and I was like, what the hell? And they put these out across the whole country. There it is.
What the hell? Man, that Grinch doesn't even look intimidating or mean or, like, miserable or anything. It just looks sauce.
Dude, this Grinch looks like he's like an edgy teen. He doesn't even look like he's an asshole. He just looks like he's edgy for the sake of it. But what is up with the ad? Green and salty, just like my nuts? Like, kids are walking around in these stores. Don't they have, like, any, like, modesty about this kind of stuff? And I think this was like a child movie or something like that.
I think the just like my nuts part looks like it was added in. It's not even the same font as the other one.
Where in the world would the green and salty part come in, though?
Oh, I think it was just green and salty. That was the only line I think they actually had. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. It's kind of still weird with the way he's looking, but I think it was added in.
Hold up. I got to go find this whole thing. We got to see if this is real or not now. We got to do the whole investigation.
Oh, man. You think the Grinch in the ad went to, like, Epstein's Island or something and came back and started selling pistachios?
Let's see here. Hang on. Let's see. Oh, dang it. It is fake. It said green and salty just like me on the real one, and then they changed it to say just like my nuts. So that whole, yeah, it was not it. Sorry, everyone. We just put out fake news here on this channel. Please forgive me, folks. If y'all unsubscribe, I understand. Y'all come here for credible news reporting. I was had years ago when I saw that, and it was wrong. I'm gonna have to make a YouTube apology video now over this and, like, awkwardly sit down in front of the camera and say, I didn't want to make this video and go through that whole thing. So anyways, here's the mortar firing near Touretsk.
Man, that last Grinch you just showed back there with the writing on it, people were mistaking him for Diddy. Man. I appreciate that laugh on that one, though. That was not deserving of a laugh like that, but I appreciate it.
No, it was a good one. It was a good one. I appreciate it. I'm in a jovial spirit tonight, Matthew. Jovial, even. Not jovial. Jovial is another kind of a thing. It's where you're slightly happy. I'm jovial tonight. I had enough coffee. I feel great. Like that my ailing bones and just worn out real feelings are gone. The coffee has disguised them. I'm absolutely stoked. And our stream tonight is brought to you by Stoke. I'm just kidding.
I might need some of that Stoke though. Like you're hyped up like crazy though. I need to try some.
Man, I'm telling you, man. When you have enough of it, it hits just right. I mean, Jerry, it hits you, you know, something like that.
Oh, they brought out the magic marker. You know, it's going down now. They got that Pixar lamp in the corner.
Man,
and it's gonna bounce around a Russian.
And there they go. They're dropping the mortar. Boink, and there goes the round. Is it going to be a hole-in-one? We couldn't tell.
Someone said coffee. It sounded like you did something else.
Well, usually whenever I get hyped up, I just sound super hyped. Because you see, the thing is, folks, is that I've never really drank a lot or done anything else. Well, I haven't done anything else at all. I've never even drank a lot. I believe I've had like a few sips. So when I have coffee or anything, because my system rarely ever has anything in it at all beyond coffee, I get super hype on coffee. So, you know, like I'm like that guy, Matthew, in that jail thing, you know, where he like saved up all of his jail credits or whatever to get like 100 packs of instant coffee, and he drank them all and he was like absolutely tweaking. That I'm like that when I have enough coffee. But anyways, we did get to see the Ukrainian Special Forces laying down some suppressing fire. Chad music ensues, which we'll have to mute. We see them laying down some fire with a PKP. And laying down some fire with a CZ Bren.
Nice. I like that one. Oh, he's back.
That was a whole different kind of a machine gun. What kind was that? That was not a PKP right there. Was that an M249? That looks like an M240 or an M249 to me.
I'm saying M249. It looks just like it.
Yeah, I'm thinking that too. And that's the end of the clip right there. And moving on from that and a little bit further on down the line towards the area around Volhedar, we got to see the Russian tactical tractor.
Oh my god. Oh, smoking too. Look at that, man. This guy's gonna get lung cancer from this thing. This is not good.
Bro, everyone else is out here in the 21st century. Meanwhile, the Russians have just discovered the Industrial Revolution. It's like, congratulations.
That's literally like, what's this guy doing blocking the camera? Like, this is chaos.
Dude, this is every Russian clip is like mild chaos. I still like the Syrian clips better though, because it is literally unmitigated chaos. Like someone's literally flying in the background on like a parachute as people are like smashing a vase in the middle of the street. Then someone comes riding through in their car at 100 miles an hour and sideswipes the guy coming down in the parachute. Like it's just craziness in Syria. Russia has like this more mild form of craziness. But we also got to see a Russian surrendering to the 68th Brigade. We got to hear them play funny comedy music in the background while he did too. We can see some Russian artillery exploding over there. But here in a second, we'll see that this Russian soldier is veiled in white, showing that he wants to surrender. And he also has a picture of a patron saint, it appears. That once again shows his will to surrender, I suppose. He has a bike and a dream.
He's just standing there. I think it's a picture of maybe like, is that a picture of his family member on there?
No, it's a patron saint or something like that from what the caption said. And now we can see him running towards the Ukrainian positions to go surrender before the Russians can shell him again. But that's the end of the clip, and still pretty interesting to see. But moving on from that and out of that area, it's now time for us to circle on up to Kyiv to watch this drone get shot down first and foremost. And that was a pretty nice shoot down right there. Beautiful.
Man, one thing's for certain. The Russians may not have air defense, and also Don in Chechnya, he might not have air defense either, but Kyiv is like protected like a fortress at this point.
Man, honestly, it is. And without further ado, y'all know what time it is. Y'all know what time it is. It is time, it looks like we don't have a speech from today, but we certainly have to have a speech today, so it's time for yesterday's speech today, on day 1028 of the war. Oh, and so without further ado, here's the speech. Speech!
Здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Коротко про сьогодні. Доповідь головкома Сирського і по ситуації на фронті, особливо Донеччина, найбільша увага напрямкам саме там, а також по ситуації в районах Курської операції. Головком доповів щодо участі північнокорейських солдатів в боях на боці російської армії. Є багато деталей і щодо знищення цих сил. За попередніми даними, росіяни намагаються приховати втрати північнокорейців. Сили оборони України та наша розвідка з'ясовують повну інформацію щодо реальних втрат російських підрозділів, до яких залучені ще й корейці. На жаль, доводиться обороняти ще й від них, хоча жодної причини немає, щоб ще й корейці гинули в цій війні. Єдина причина – це божевілля Путіна, яке охопило Росію і підживлює цю війну. Будемо і надалі захищати наші позиції. Сьогодні є важливий 15-й пакет санкцій ЄС і вдячний партнерам за цю підтримку примусу Росії до миру. Серед іншого, є санкції проти тіньового танкерного флоту, який Росія використовує, щоб фінансувати агресію. І це зараз важливий крок. І всі російські танкери, всі компанії та фізичні особи, які допомагають Росії фінансувати війну, щоб всі вони були зрештою санкціоновані. Треба продовжувати цей тиск на Росію і не давати їм адаптуватись до санкцій. Чим важче будуть санкції для Росії, тим швидше вони зайдуть в реальну і справжню дипломатію. Сьогодні була також доповідь глави уряду щодо співпраці з нашими партнерами, зокрема фінансової співпраці. Прем'єр-міністр доповів, що 20 мільярдів доларів коштів від заморожених російських активів вже у Світовому банку на рахунку. Також окремо проговорили роботу з Європейським банком реконструкції та розвитку. Є конкретні програми, і в наступному році ми зможемо додати додатковий об'єм енергії завдяки тільки цим програмам з ЄБРР. Є також і додаткові кошти на програми енергоефективності. Дуже важливо все реалізувати якнайшвидше. І ще одне. Поступово погоджуємо з нашими дипломатами нові призначення послів України та заміни в дипломатичному корпусі. Ми готуємо посилення нашої команди України. Зовнішньополітична робота наступного року буде ще більш напруженою, ніж цьогоріч, і має бути сильною. Наступний рік повинен стати часом встановлення миру, надійного миру, і я вдячний всім партнерам, які допомагають. Сильна і скоординована робота – це найважливіше. Слава Україні!
And
Heroam Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on this very day of 1028 of the war. And that moves us on into the second segment of tonight's stream. And boy, howdy, is it a fun segment. We get to talk to each and every single one of y'all, which is always a fun segment because we could talk about literally anything and everything. We could talk about how you're doing, where you're from, what do you like to eat, what's your favorite kind of pizza. Let's talk about buttered sausage. Where does it come from? Why is it here? What is it doing? Get that thing out of my face. I'm just kidding. That's a little reference to a stupid little segment. I forgot from who, but it was from this Gary Busey guy, I think that was his name. But beyond that, we can talk about literally anything and everything in this segment. Just for newcomers to know, because we have had about, I think, 70 new subscribers from the stream tonight. If you had made it to this point, the news is over. So if you're wondering, where in the world did the news go? Well, that was the first 2 hours of the stream, my young Watson, and you'll have to rewind to watch that part specifically. But the remainder of the stream, probably the entire hour and a half of the remainder of the stream that will exist, will be entirely about talking to y'all. And I have to say that it is a absolutely incredible and fun time. And while Matthew says the coffee is still hidden, LOL, it's time for us to move on into that segment while the coffee still be hidden, just like others have hidden in the past. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so it's now time for the final question segment of the night. Now, of course, we have one more poll to get to, and this one says, what will be the next step in the Ukraine-Russia war? So 51% said Russia strikes with another IRBM missile, while 25% said Ukraine starts new large offensives against Russia, and 15% said Russia starts new large offensives, and 9% said maybe Ukraine and Russia negotiations do open up. And honestly, I'm actually with the 51%. And this is a bit of an unfortunate thing right here, but I think Russia is going to strike with another IRBM first. We've been warned by U.S. intelligence over the last week or so that it is coming, and we don't know exactly when it's going to happen, and we don't know what the target's going to be, but it will be happening soon. And Russia has already said they're going to keep testing the IRBM missiles, the new Oreshnik that is, and I think they're going to strike once again before anything else happens. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say Russia probably will strike with another IRBM. Considering that they've already reached this escalatory level, it's a definite certainty at this point that they will. So it's only a matter of time. I'd say probably within the next month or two, we'll probably see another strike, just like the last one. Probably directed at another Ukrainian city, however, most likely the city of Kryvyi Rih, Zaporizhia, or Kharkiv, if I had to assume. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the questions for real, for real. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so moving on to our last question segment here, the long-lasting question segment. Our first super chat is going to go to Corsair F4U, who put in that $50 donation, and thank you very much, Corsair, for that support. He said, LSA forever, and question for political scientist Matt. That's also very high praise, by the way. I'm no political scientist. But he said, how does the system of checks and balances work at the U.S. national level? And thanks. And also, thank you very much, Corsair, as well. And also, I can't get super deep into it. It might get a little bit political, sadly, because pretty much everything's become political these days. And by nature, this is political science, so it is slightly political. But I can say that checks and balances typically keeps a check and a balance, like it says, on each branch of the government. All three branches have abilities to regulate each other, but they don't have the ability to necessarily override one another, but they can check and balance, like the name says, each branch or another. And we've seen that actually happen over the past year or so. And, you know, I'm getting into political territory already, but, you know, it has happened. So I'm going to leave it at that. But, of course, checks and balances is necessary in democracy, because if we don't have that, then one branch might run rogue, and you know how that ends. Look at South Korea. One branch ran rogue over there, and look how that went. So there you go. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that while you address that question, for you, Corsair, to Matthew, I can also weigh in on it just a little bit. You see, checks and balances is a very special kind of a system to the United States. Checks and balances do exist in other countries, but we were pretty much the first one in the modern world to create a system of checks and balances within our version of a democracy, and generally we, in my opinion, have the best one so far. Other countries seem to have a kind of more iffy form of checks and balances. I'll be entirely honest with you all, Britain really has none. The parliament is the law. Like, the parliament rules the nation. There is really no checks and balances to it at all, and while some people are going to say, well, what about the House of Lords? The House of Lords is really almost like a weak Senate compared to what we have in the United States, and it really isn't a check or balance that much, especially these days, because it's pretty much just given at this point that whatever the House of Commons does, the House of Lords will give it ascension to head to the Crown, and then the Crown signs off on it as well, because the Crown is a benevolent leadership and does not shoot down any laws that are passed by the Parliament. So largely at that point, there is no checks and balances in the UK, and while they have a Supreme Court, their Supreme Court doesn't have supreme power to overturn what the Parliament is doing. It simply just kind of advises them and says, oh, I don't really think that's a good idea, and that's it. Or they kind of generally do things that the Parliament doesn't want to get burdened with doing on the legalese side of things. So it really is not a system that has checks and balances. France really doesn't have checks and balances either, because it's a presidential republic. So for that reason, the president's pretty much in charge and has pretty much complete authority, especially if his political party is the majority party in the National Assembly. The president rules without any sort of questions made by the National Assembly or anyone able to compete or really shoot down any actions that he's making. He pretty much does that by his own act, and there's really no one that can tell him otherwise until he's voted out. In the
Enforcer, I will issue a slight correction here. I'm not super familiar with France, but from what I am aware, apparently the president of France can be impeached by the French Parliament for willfully violating the French Constitution or any of their national laws. If I have that correct, I believe that is the case. So that would be a check and balance on the president by the Parliament.
That is true, but the thing is like, who in the world's going to say that he's violating the law? Because if he's the president while he is also a part of the majority party, then that means he quite literally gets to do whatever he does. He could just change the law to make whatever action he's about to do lawful, and there's really no way for anyone to shoot that down, because it's not like the National Assembly can veto him. Quite literally written in the Constitution, if he is the president of a majority party, he's the president without question. The National Assembly doesn't even weigh in on making laws. He makes them unilaterally and then enforces them unilaterally.
Maybe so, maybe so. But, technically that could be said for the U.S. as well. And I'm trying not to get political here with this, but technically you could, fix it to where, let's say a president does not want to get impeached. They could fix it to how basically they couldn't get impeached. They can have certain people that are in positions that don't want to impeach them, even though they've done an impeachable offense. There's always some way you can try to override the check and balance, but it still is nonetheless a check.
Yeah, that's true, but I think that America does it far better, because there is a check or a balance somewhere built in where you could pretty much just get things gridlocked if you needed to. Like, of course, you're not going to completely stop one, say, branch from doing what they want, but you can still gridlock it enough that it won't really go forward. Like, for example, the president can issue an executive order, and then the Supreme Court could shoot it down for being unconstitutional. The Congress can't pass any law that they want because it could be vetoed by the president and not make it forward from that point, or it could be shot down in the Senate, or it could be shot down really anywhere at that point, including the Supreme Court. If the president gets out of line, the Congress can impeach him. The Supreme Court, I believe, can also be impeached, although this never happened. The Supreme Court can't do whatever they want because there's the ability to just start packing the court and throwing in new justices, although in reality, those justices aren't bound to any decision. If they're put in there, they can do whatever they want. And that's something always funny that I find when people talk about the Supreme Court, because for some reason people always think that the Supreme Court, whoever appoints the justices, like those people have a debt of gratitude to the president that appoints them. That's not the case at all, because once they're in the Supreme Court, there's really no way to get them out. They cannot be removed. They don't serve in terms. They serve for life. So once they're on the Supreme Court, they don't have to show any debt of gratitude to anyone. They're there until they die or retire. So they can do whatever they want at that point, regardless of what they said to get into that position. And the only way to really get them out is to impeach them in the Congress off of some sort sort of a serious offense, but to actually have any kind of political motivation to do that, the offense has to be very severe, and therefore, for that reason, you can't just randomly remove justices through impeachment at a whim, for the large part.
And, also another interesting fact as well is there's actually no code of ethics for the U.S. Supreme Court at all. There's no ethical code whatsoever. In fact, you don't even have to be an attorney to be a U.S. Supreme Court justice. You simply have to get appointed to it, and you simply become it. You don't have to be an attorney or have gone to law school at all.
My kind, the Supreme Court. But beyond that, I'm just kidding. But beyond that, I will say, though, that I think that the U.S. government does checks and balances the best because, yes, there are moments where it has been tested, not only now, but well off in the past. There's been loads and loads of times that people have tried to test the checks and balances system, but still, it has weathered the test of time incredibly well, and generally, the whole entire thing about checks and balances is that it really never stops anyone completely if they're really dedicated to doing something. Like, for example, the Indian Removal Act of 1826, if I'm correct, which was made by Andrew Jackson, which removed all Native Americans, or American Indians, if you want to call them that, from the American Southeast. So the Supreme Court actually did shoot that down and declared that it was unconstitutional and unlawful. And then Andrew Jackson simply said, well, if they say that, let them enforce it. And then he just forced them by bayonet point on the Trail of Tears into the Oklahoma Territory. So while the checks and balances system technically did work then, there was no way for them, well, really the Supreme Court to enforce at that point. Andrew Jackson was adamant on doing what he was going to do, and it didn't appear that the Congress considered that serious enough to impeach him over. And so that really got, generally, he pretty much slid by with doing that, although technically what he was doing at that point was unlawful. The Supreme Court had shot it down before he'd even gotten to actually forcefully removing them. But beyond that, that's kind of how it works as a whole, because really the actual truth is that if the army sided with the president, like let's just say this in a hypothetical scenario in America, checks and balances only work because people adhere to what they are. If the president had the complete and devoted loyalty of the military, he could simply just suspend the Congress and also dissolve the Supreme Court. And while checks and balances say that he couldn't do that, who's going to stop him? He's got the military behind him, so he could do really whatever he wants at that point and summarily execute anyone that went against him. Luckily, we don't have crazy people like that. Well, hopefully we'll never have anyone crazy like that. But still, technically, checks and balances only work as far as the people inside the system will allow it to work. But still, I think it's a very good system, all things considered, because while there has been a lot of interesting and colorful different kinds of characters who have been in the government throughout the 250 years that the United States has existed at this point, in Congress, in the Supreme Court, in the office of the president, checks and balances largely have shown to work and do pretty well at what they do, which is making things extremely difficult, if not impossible, to do if they generally go against the grain of what this nation is. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And let's see, also, the 420 said, the military takes an oath to the Constitution, Andrew, not the president. I don't know what it is with you tonight. It seems like you're just trying to pick a problem with anything. It doesn't matter if they say that. If they are pretty much undyingly devoted to the president, it doesn't matter if they swore an oath to the soil. They will be able to overthrow the military, overthrow the government at that point, because they have the military behind them. Like, for example, in the Soviet Union, the Soviet military didn't take an oath to the chairman of the Soviet Party. They took an oath to the Communist Party. But nevertheless, they would end up following whoever they wanted to, and that would largely be the guy who was in charge. They pretty much, Khrushchev was able to pretty much get the loyalty of the military assured and was able to bring himself into power that way. Stalin pretty much did the exact same thing. Pretty much any leader in the Soviet Union, except for Gorbachev, came to power that way. Like, that's not to say that the Soviet Union's government system is identical to that of the United States, but it's not out of the question that regardless of the oath, these people can have a loyalty beyond their oath and then start to follow unconditionally the president, which pretty much throws the entire system on its head. And the president, pretty much at that point, has the power to completely dissolve the Congress and the Supreme Court, regardless whether it's unconstitutional or not, because who's going to be there to challenge it at that point? The military is not.
Also, I would imagine that in South Korea, I would imagine that their military leadership probably did swear an oath, probably to South Korean law, I would imagine. I don't know that for a fact. But look at how that went. The military ended up following the president's orders until the parliament said something else, and they're like, well, who are we going to follow here? Like, we're going to pick either the parliament or the president. And they ended up following the parliament, thankfully, and they didn't overthrow everything.
And let's see here. This is actually the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, this isn't the military pledge. This is the Pledge of Allegiance in South Korea, which oddly enough is kind of a bit of an ethno-state thing. I strongly pledge in front of the proud Korean flag allegiance to my fatherland, to devote my body and soul to the eternal glory of the ethnicity. That's a little interesting.
The ethnicity.
Here's the official English language translation, though, because this one, I believe, is a bastardization of it. I pledge to the proud, in front of the proud Taeguk flag, allegiance to the Republic of Korea for the eternal glory of the country, liberty and freedom to the Republic of Korea. I feel like that's a lot more on brand instead of eternal glory to the ethnicity. It's like, that sounds a little...
Well, the old one there was the 1972 version, the first one you read, and that's the 2007 version on the new one. So apparently that was the old school way. The old school one was kind of a little bit out there. I must admit, the last little phrase there was a little interesting.
Yeah, it's like that sounds a little like Nazi almost. Like, it's like that's a little bit questionable. But let's see if I can find the military allegiance or the let's see. Hang on here. Let's see, South Korean oath in, let's see, in military. There we go. Maybe that'll get it. So this appears to be the pledge that is made as far as the military as well. This just seems to be the pledge. Like, this is the pledge you say as a citizen and in the military, is the one I just told you all about, which is the one where they say they pledge eternal glory to the country, liberty, and freedom of the Republic of Korea. So technically, the military also makes an oath in South Korea to the Republic of Korea, the government as a whole, not the president of Korea. Yet, nevertheless, the military still largely followed Yoon Suk-yeol's orders for a while on attempting to overthrow the government and dissolve the National Assembly. So, with that in mind, yeah, you know, you can make the point, well, I mean, they have an oath to the Constitution. But a lot of people also don't have an interpretation to the Constitution where it's pretty much loyalty to the government without question. A lot of people make it sound like it's loyalty conditionally to the government depending on who I like, which is how a lot of people interpret it these days. And then a lot of people go to the Declaration of Independence and go, the government that was, well, the rebels in America that were trying to overthrow British rule said that if I don't like the government in America now, I can just simply conduct an armed rebellion. And it's like, no, they didn't. It's like, because I think George Washington put one down like instantly right after. Let me go pull that one up, because that one's actually pretty funny, because it throws the whole thing on its head. So like, the founding fathers wanted you to, you know, overthrow the government. Then why did George Washington put down the first people who tried that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like people always talk about the founding fathers would have wanted us to overthrow the government. It's like, no, they wouldn't have, you goof. They literally put y'all down. Like, it's like, here's a painting of it right here. He's commanding the damn army of the United States at this point, by this time in history, in 1793, I believe it was, and put it down. Like he legitimately did.
Why? Wait a minute. Why does it look like in that picture right there that it's just clones of George Washington with all the guys on the horses behind him? It's just literally clones of him.
Well, he's simply the greatest, Matthew. I mean, like, he literally had a clone army made of him.
Yeah, really. Like, oh, man, he had the nicest horse, though. Like, damn, that horse is huge.
Man, that thing I think is a Clydesdale, honestly, man. Like, that ain't no Tennessee Walker around here. That's no doubt about it. But still, here's the general kind of a best way to put it. The whiskey tax was put on to, I believe, sugars and some other things that were used to make whiskey, a good way to generate revenue for the new republic at the time. The farmers resisted the tax. They actually started a armed uprising for a small part. This is kind of like the synopsis here, the summary. So let me see. Let's see. Resistance came to a climax in 1794 when the U.S. Marshal arrived in western Pennsylvania to serve writs to distillers who had not yet paid the excise. The alarm was raised, and more than 500 armed men attacked the fortified home of tax inspector John Naval. Washington responded by sending peace commissioners to western Pennsylvania to negotiate with the rebels, while at the same time calling on governors to send a militia force to enforce the tax. So here we go. This was the first attempt by anyone, and I saw some people bring up Shays' Rebellion. Shays' Rebellion was a little different, because that happened during the time of the Confederation, not the time of the Republic. So that doesn't really count too much, because Shays' Rebellion is what actually led to the Constitutional Convention of 1787, in a sense, and the creation of the Federal Republic that we know today. So it's pretty much like, while it's a part of American history as the United States of America, it's the time of the Confederation and not the time of the Republic. So it's a bit different for the large part with how that worked. But still, anyways, so to give the example here, because I just cannot stand how people always read the Declaration of Independence and act like the founding fathers would want you to overthrow the government that they fought to create. He literally started to raise a militia while he's like, hey, look, calm down, y'all. There's no reason to do this. He was in the background building up an army to go put this rebellion down. He wasn't like, well, they have a right. I mean, they have a right to literally topple the government. It's like, no. It's like, that's never the case. A government is always going to exist and ensure its own survival through its existence. It's like, they're never going to allow people to just randomly march up onto the Capitol and overthrow the government. It's like, that's just crazy. But anyways, they sent out about...
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. But anyways, Washington actually commanded the army himself that he raised of 13,000 militiamen, which of course outnumbers the 500 pretty largely, by the governors of Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. The leaders of the rebels all fled before the arrival, and there was no confrontation, but about 150 of the rebels were arrested, but only 20 were held for trial in Philadelphia, and only 2 were convicted, and those were eventually pardoned. But still, it set an example from that point forward that you couldn't just overthrow the government just because you didn't like it. But still, people kind of forget that nowadays, because those lessons of the Founding Fathers, interesting enough, are long since past at this point. And I always see people from different political Kool-Aids that they drink saying that the government needs to be overthrown because it's not the government that they like. And it's like, well, it's a democratically elected government. If you don't like it, just vote again in the next 4 years. And if you lose again, cry about it, because that's how this republic functions. But anyways, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running and asking such an interesting question for the political science major Matthew, Enforcer Matt here, and thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one here. This one goes to none other than GunFox61, the channel legend, who throws in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, GunFox, for that support. He said, February 13th, 1950, the longest missing nuclear weapon. And then March 10th, 1956, 6 years after losing the first bomb. February 5th, 1958, Savannah. January 24th, 1961, somewhere near Goldsboro, North Carolina. Scary history facts.
And I thank you so much for the support. And crazily enough, GunFox61, there is just a couple of nuclear warheads that we cannot account for. They're somewhere in between South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina along the coast. We don't really know where they are. They're probably buried in the ground a good bit at this point. Might not even be kind of live, if you want to call it that. So it might be fine. But still, there are nuclear weapons just somewhere out there that we don't know their exact location. And it is a little bit concerning to think that some of that happened around this time. What was kind of interesting, though, at that moment, so that the reason why 2 of the nuclear warheads, well, atomic warheads, were lost in North Carolina is because a B-52 carrying them actually broke up over North Carolina while it was flying, and so the atomic warheads just fell out of the plane, unarmed, and just ended up just burying themselves somewhere in North Carolina. We still don't really know where. I think they found one, but they never found the second one that was being carried by the B-52. So it's out there somewhere, and, we'll probably never find it. It probably won't end up being that big of an issue, though. If it blows up, it blows up. I'm doubting that it will, but I don't think it'll be a big issue because the chance of it detonating.
I don't know. It seemed like it'd be a big issue to me, but here's a trivia question for you, since you know your history. What's it called when a nuclear weapon goes missing like that? What is that officially called by the military?
That is called a broken arrow.
Yes, it is actually. That's pretty good right there. I knew you knew that one, though, because you're already studying the histories and things like that, and studying the histories tells you things like that. But yeah, it's called a broken arrow, and like you said, to date, only 6 nuclear weapons have been lost and never recovered.
Well, actually, another interesting thing is that in Vietnam, broken arrow was used again as a code over radio to say that pretty much the situation was lost on the ground, and they needed to divert all available assets and even assets that weren't available towards that direction because things were going so badly. During the Battle of Ai Drang, Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore actually declared a broken arrow over the radio, not meaning that a nuclear weapon was lost, but meaning that U.S. positions were surrounded and things were going horrendously, and that pretty much all all available air and or ground assets that could be diverted to the area needed to be, so that way they could start to repulse the VC elements that were engaging them in battle around the area.
That's pretty interesting. I actually did not know that. And also, I saw Tia Berry LSA say in the live chat, said ... only 6 nuclear missiles missing. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too when I was reading that. It's like 6 nuclear warheads or bombs missing like that since 1950, and we don't know where they are. They could have been recovered and secretly stored somewhere. They could be simply, you know, at the bottom of a swamp, perhaps, or something like that. We don't know. Maybe one day someone's going to run across it when more areas of America get developed by construction companies, and it could be a bad day whenever that happens.
Let's see here. Let me see if I can get y'all a picture of one of the missing bombs. Here we go. So, let's see here. Broken arrow incidents. There's been 32 broken arrow incidents where nuclear bombs are have kind of just fallen around, you know, and we eventually recover most of them, but there's 6 of them that are still out there somewhere. And I believe, yeah, let's see here. I think it was this one. No, that wasn't it. That one crashed where? Somewhere near Morocco, which is interesting. But I'm trying to see, is this it? Oh yeah. This was one of the ones that actually was in the B-52 at the time. It's literally like a mini nuke from Fallout.
It's a cartoon bomb. Yeah, it would be kind of hard to miss that one. So unless it went to the bottom of like a body of water, I don't think you'd miss it.
But let's see here. I'm trying to see because I believe this
also, what happens, by the way, like, for example, I know it's not armed, but if the thing hits the ground from a really high altitude, even if it's not armed, it seems like it would cause some type of reaction.
Well, actually, this one did, because it actually did not have the fissile nuclear core, which, you know, is of course required to start the reaction inside of the bomb for it to explode. But when it did land, the conventional high explosives inside the bomb did go off, and so it actually ended up injuring 6 people, and they sued the Air Force for about $570,000 in today's currency. There's the bomb crater right here.
They got a nice payout from that. Also, it's always near a swampy area. Like it says over there on the left, swampy area. Like, it's weird how all these nukes fall in these swamps.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? I'm trying to see if I can find the one where they actually got the picture of the bomb that they excavated. That's not it. I think it's the Goldsboro crash. Oh yeah, there it is. That's one of the ones they recovered.
Oh, that's nice. So they actually got that back. They got all the nuclear material back and everything?
Yeah, everything. It was intact. I believe this is the one where 2 of the bombs fell out. And let's see. Carrying 2 Mark 39s. It broke up in midair over the area of North Carolina, eastern North Carolina. The crew ejected, and let's see. 1 ejected and didn't survive, and 2 died in the crash. So let's see. One of the bombs was judged by nuclear weapons engineers at the time to have only been 1 safety switch away from detonation, and that it was credible to imagine conditions under which it could have detonated. So it was by absolute miracle and luck that this bomb didn't detonate over the middle of North Carolina when it was impacting the ground, for the large part. But the other one is still missing. They only recovered 1 of these, and here is the actual real picture again. Parachute attached and everything, as it just kind of gently plopped down into the ground and didn't explode. This one would have exploded, though, but there is one out there still that they don't know where it is. And let me see here. Oh, wait, no. Actually, they did find it. There it is. There they are digging the other one out of the ground. Also, let's see here. Matthew was telling me that we have terrible lag, which is very unfortunate. I hate to hear that. But let me see if I can fix that really quickly. Let's see here. Let me just take that off screen and stop the stream and disconnect and reconnect, and then we'll also shut that down. And hello, are you there?
Yes, I'm here now. Hello.
Is the lag good or bad?
It sounds like it's okay for now. Hopefully it stays that way.
Hopefully it does. And you know, Matty, I just tried something new. I closed down the control room and restarted it to see if it was an issue with that. So we will see now. We will see indeed. But nevertheless,
Can you screen share though? I'd like to see this nuke.
Oh, yeah, sure. I actually found the one that they were digging out of the ground. I got the story a little wrong. They actually did recover both of them. And here was the one that actually buried itself into the ground, and here they are digging it out and recovering it.
Oh, wow, look at that. They brought down the flimsy-looking clown ladder, but they got it out, though. That was a good thing.
Great thing indeed. But still, the incidents that involve these are always a little interesting. Also, one that was really cool is that a B-36 actually crashed with a couple on board, and this is a largely forgotten bomber in American history because it was a Cold War bomber. A lot of people don't remember them unless they're still in service today. But they even had a crazier version of this thing, a upgrade of the B-36. Yeah, here we go. They actually mounted 4 jet engines onto this thing, along with the 6 propeller engines that it had. Here's a B-29 for scale, just to give you an idea of how big a B-36 was. It dwarfed the B-29. B-29's not that big, though. In real life, it's only about 110 feet long. So it's about the same length as a B-2 bomber, a B-2 Spirit from nowadays. But this thing still dwarfed it and was the bomber that immediately pretty much succeeded the B-29. But beyond that, I'm trying to see if I can get you all a cool picture. When? Oh, that's just tests. Okay, I was like, what the hell? Here's a fella hanging out by one of the main landing gear. A pretty big rubber tire. I guess you could say that was a lot of rubber. Oh, giggity, giggity. But also, what the hell is this? Huh, they added treads.
It's like, yeah, treads on the bottom of a plane.
So apparently what they were doing, it's an experimental tracked landing gear to reduce ground pressure for soft field use. So they were planning on landing this thing on just a grass field, and this was supposed to help out with softening the impact and not burying it in the mud immediately.
That honestly sounds like a really bad idea. Like, it went from being a simple tire to a very complex thing that could break real easy.
Yeah, well, like suspension and everything. It's like, this is a terrible idea. That's horrendous. I'm guessing that's why it didn't really work out. But let's see. I'm trying to find y'all one of the upgraded B-36s. Here we go. This one right here. You can actually see the 6 piston engines and then the 4 jet engines that they installed onto it as well. Which is...
Yeah, I don't like that, man. I don't like the rear-facing ones like that. That's not good.
Yeah, the whole thing was honestly weird. They retired these things out of service, I believe, relatively quickly. And let me see when they did. They retired them in 1959. So it lasted for about, like, 14 years in Air Force service, and then it was phased out. Crazily enough, though, when this thing was actually built, I believe, if I am remembering correctly, it actually was still under the Army Air Corps. Yeah. Yeah, when this thing first went into service, it wasn't the Air Force yet. It was still a part of the Army.
Also, by the way, I was reading here, it said the German, whatever that is right there, would request a similar ultra-long-range America bomber. Can we see what that looked like?
Yes, these things were whack.
It was literally called the America bomber?
Yeah, the whole idea was that they build a few of these, fly them over New York City, drop some bombs on us, and that would be it. That was the whole plan of this thing.
That's crazy. That's like literally the first like purpose-built bomber, like literally called, like it literally named the target.
Yeah, like it's like the Germans are building this thing called the America bomber. Must be built to bomb Spain, maybe. It's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. But I wonder if I can get you another picture of this thing. War Thunder actually has a pretty interesting model of it. But here it is, the Messerschmitt 264. These things were terrible looking, man. Like, they were so ugly. You know what? I think I'm going to have to pull up the ME 264 right here and get you the War Thunder model, because they have a really good... Oh, look at this. It's a color picture of the thing.
Oh, that's interesting. Also, it says that never was, so they never built any of them, you say?
Well, they built a prototype, but it just didn't really match the specs that they were looking for, so they just gave up on the project entirely.
Yeah, kind of like a lot of their projects, really. They always had these, like, grand, like, blueprint ideas and things, but they never really came true. I think that's honestly, like, some of the propaganda with that whole regime was that they were, like, geniuses, and they were on some fronts when it comes to developing equipment, but at the same time, though, a lot of the crap they would write down and make blueprints for and plans for, it just never came around. Like, all these UFO ideas and stuff, and the History Channel will hype them up like, oh, they had a UFO in the garage. Just like, no, they didn't. It's like we never found it.
Man, that's all the Nazis after the war that were coping. Because you know something that's crazy is that a lot of the post-World War II knowledge about the Nazi Germans was actually, crazily enough, written by former Nazis themselves. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, like a lot of the books out there, man, about Germany in World War II that were written after the war during the 1950s to 80s were written by people who were either generals of Nazi Germany, high officials of Nazi Germany, or other people who were involved in the Nazi government pretty heavily. And they still had this cope thing going on about them. And it completely throws the idea on its head where they say the victors write history. No, the Nazis actually wrote the history about what Nazi Germany was capable of, and they lost lost, and people still believe it to this day. That's why everyone believes that the Nazis were just so technologically advanced and capable when they really weren't, is because every Nazi that could write after the war was writing books going, oh yes, we were simply working on a UFO, it's just that we didn't have the prerequisite materials, but we could have made one and killed everyone, and it was stuff like that, and then people just started believing them. Like, it was weird.
Did they write the part in the history books about how they took meth and Pervitin and all that stuff?
No, they completely glossed over that stuff.
That figures.
Yeah, and they also completely glossed over Hitler's slush fund that he used to pay off generals to make them yes men and all that kind of stuff. Like, they glossed over all that. They would make Germany sound like it was magical. They'd be like, we were working on the V2, but what we were really working on were ICBMs in 1940. It's like, no, you weren't. It's like, you're a liar, and you ought to know better. Because when you look at all of the official documents that were actually being written in the war, I believe that one of the documents that was being written was like, the V2 rockets are not good. We're killing more people in the labor camps building them since they were actually killing with these things. Like, they're not good. And it's like, and then after the war, they go, oh, these things are great. And then everyone starts believing them. It's like, I don't know why, because anyone who actually starts looking at the stats would know that that's not true. Like, the V1 Doodlebug was a failure. Like, yes, it was like the first, I guess you could call it, cruise missile in the world, but it was still an unmitigated failure for the cost to produce them versus the amount of damage that they actually inflicted. And the V2 rocket, which everyone knows, let me go get it, the V2 rocket. Crazily enough, this rocket was pretty much one of the first in the world that was actually used in military, in military use. But what's interesting about this thing is that it killed 12,000 people in production and testing of the missile, and then it only killed 5,000 people in actual use. So it killed more people to produce the thing than it actually did to use it.
And how did it wipe them out? What happened?
Well, one, they would use nothing but forced labor from the nearby camps to produce these things, so the labor was considered expendable. So they would just work people to death producing these things. Second thing is that they had this tendency to explode in testing. So they would end up killing a lot of people who were around the pad in the first initial tests. The second thing is that generally they were just highly unsafe to use. A lot of stuff was highly unsafe that the Nazis made to use in World War II. And so this thing just ended up killing loads of people who were involved in operating them in actual usage or producing them and developing them. So it killed loads of people, thousands of people to make this thing happen, and then it hardly had any impact. I mean, yes, they rained down on London, but they killed hardly anyone in comparison to what it took to actually get it to even get to London in the first place. Another one, this one is actually one that a lot of people hype up as well, is the ME-163 Comet, which is a rocket-propelled interceptor. And a lot of people don't know this, but it was actually a little common for this thing to liquefy its pilot before it even took off. Do you know that, Matthew?
No, I didn't know that. I was just trying to look at it. It looks like that little Guppy plane that they put in the cartoons back in the day.
Yeah, so crazily enough, what this thing is it is a rocket-based interceptor plane. So it is rocket-propelled, but it's rocket-propelled not by a solid fuel rocket, but it's a liquid-fueled rocket. And that's what's interesting, because the mixture that they would use, I believe it was called C-Stoff, spelled, the letter C and then S-T-O-F-F. But the stuff was extremely acidic. It was more acidic than hydrochloric acid, interestingly enough, Matthew. And what was crazy about it is that the tanks that they had them in would get extremely cold and they would be susceptible to rupture. And if they ruptured, pretty much all of the liquid would pour out onto the pilot in that cockpit and literally dissolve them before they could even get them out of the cockpit. There are multiple examples of that happening before it could even take off. And then at that point, the Comet's pretty much rendered unusable because the tanks have ruptured. The pilot's literally goo and covering the entire cockpit with, blood and bodily fluids, and also his flesh, so it's no longer usable, so they have to dispose of the whole Comet at that point. But beyond that, this thing was also hyped up insanely. They were like, oh my god, it's a rocket interceptor. It's like, yeah, so it's the best at making the rocket intercept us. And then it would literally liquefy pilots and was hardly even usable. A lot of the times, they would get up to the altitude that the bombers were at, and right before they get there, they literally run out of propellant. So at that point, they're just kind of gliding up and they get shot down pretty easily. So that's another thing that wasn't really that great about the ME-163s. There are, I could bring up a million things about what the Nazis did in World War II that even looked technologically advanced, and it was hardly even really fleshed out or really thought out a lot. And then you could bring up stuff that Britain and America did, and it was honestly pretty damn solid. Like, you know, like the ME-262 this is the one. Like, I know everyone's got to know this one, because this is like the plane. Like, you know this one, right, Matthew?
Oh, yeah, that's the Messerschmitt. I know that one.
So this thing used Juno jet engines. How long do you think the average flight time on a Juno jet engine was before it was rendered completely unusable due to wear?
Maybe a week.
30 minutes.
30 minutes. So they had to replace the engine every time they flew?
Yes, every time this plane flew, by the time it landed, the engines were shot and the whole thing had to be replaced. So it only had a 30-minute flight time per 2 sets of Juno engines. Completely uneconomical to use. Not only that, it wasn't even really that fast. Like, it's really hyped up how fast this thing was. It ended up getting up to speeds close to what a P-51 could do. These things actually ended up getting shot down in insanely high amount by P-51 Mustangs escorting bombers over Germany. Like, it wasn't that good of a plane, but they'll make it sound like it was a miracle. You know, like this thing was just truly amazing. I mean, they were next to alien space technology, but in reality, the thing sucks. And then the British, at the exact same time, came out with the Meteor, and let me see if I can find it here. The Meteor fighter.
Also, by the way, I saw Chaz Martin saying the live show. He said, "What about the Germans, the Glock?" I don't know. I don't know about the Glock. My Glock's over here on the side of the desk. The Glock. It's over here. But seriously speaking, though, the Glock, that bell-shaped thing or whatever, I don't think that was actually a real thing. I think that was just an idea, one of the many ideas that they had, and it never came to fruition. And because if it did, we would have taken it, and I don't think we ever took it.
Also, really quickly, I saw Fuma say, please give some credit to the first fighter jet. I don't even think the ME-262 was the first. Let's see here. April of 1944... yeah, it beat out the Meteor by just literally a month and a half. But this was the British World War II jet fighter. This is something that a lot of people don't know, is that the Allies had finally received their first jet fighters off of the assembly line about the same time the Germans had. It's just that the British didn't use them in frontline service because they were still trying to get them through their teething phase and figure out if they were going to be good or not. So they didn't really want to rush them into frontline service because they weren't desperate like the Nazis. So the British would use these things to intercept V-1 doodlebugs and pretty much tip them over or shoot them down while they were flying over the south coast of Britain or in the Channel. But these things were great. Like, these things were actually good. They were really safe. They would have a pretty long service life in the Royal Air Force afterwards, only being retired, I believe. Let's see here. When was the last one retired from British service? Let's see. Yeah, it went obsolete in the late 50s, so for an early jet, it actually was in service for a good while. And then we had one as well, and I believe that ours was the P-59 Aerocomet. And this was our first fighter jet in America. This thing's ugly. Honestly, it was very humble beginnings. These things were hideous. But we had this thing in service in, that was designed and built during World War II. But I want to find when, let's see. As the British were further along in jet engine development, they donated an engine for the United States to copy in 1941 that became the basis for the General Electric J-31, jet engine used by the P-59 a year later. But when did this thing get put into service? Let's see. Come on here. Hang on. Second prototype was towed to Hawesfield of Republic Road. Let's see. Operational service. Let's see. Even as deliveries of the YP-59s began in July, the USAF had a preliminary order for 100 production machines as the P-59A Aerocomet, the name having been given by Bell employees. This was confirmed on the 11th of March, but was later cut to 50 aircraft after the procurement bureaucracy had digested the earlier evaluation. So, when was this thing actually put into service? I'm wanting to find the month. So this thing pretty much went into service at the same time as the 262 and the Meteor, it appears. Sometime around 1944 in the later months. But this is what they actually looked like kind of in service in their earlier years. They pretty much all ended up becoming trainers, though. I don't believe any of them were actually armed with any kind of guns on board. This one actually was. You can actually see the nose-mounted 50 cals, but it wasn't, still, like, that's the thing, though, is that everyone always makes it sound like the Nazi Germans literally had tech that no one else had. America and Britain had that tech, like at the exact same time, if not earlier. Flying wing, America had it first. Jet engines, Britain did it first. Nuclear weaponry, really, Britain and America were working on that almost identically to the Germans. We actually made usable nuclear weapons. So we pretty much beat the Germans.
Flying saucer, we had that first too in
totally.
1958.
Yeah, we had everything.
No, for real, like we actually had that. We had the Avrocar in 1958. It was a failure, but it was nonetheless a flying saucer of sorts.
Wasn't the Avrocar Canadian? Yeah, it was the Avro Canada Avrocar.
Yeah, but it was being designed for the U.S. Air Force and U.S. Army.
Man, these things were actually kind of cool, though, man. I'm not going to lie. Like, nowadays, I think it would be cool to have one of these things, because think about it. If you can make one of these things powerful enough with a modern jet engine and the fuel usage was economical, man, it would be a breeze getting over minefields with this thing.
It would be, but I don't understand really how they kept the thing level. Like, obviously, they had to have some type of, like, gyroscopic mechanism inside of it to keep it level, because one jet engine in the center is not going to level that thing out.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, holy moly. Dude, that's actually a really cool, rendering right there. It's literally just a thing that flies around with a recoilless gun and blasts people. I'm not going to lie, that's actually pretty damn cool.
They were trying to jump way too far ahead of their time. Like, we could actually pull that off now with different means of technology, not that necessarily, but they were trying to go ahead and get that done. Also, like, this was meant to be a flying Jeep. I thought it was meant to be like a actual aircraft.
No, it was more so supposed to be kind of like a hovercraft on the ground, not really getting high off the ground, but it could get up to, apparently, let's see here. Was received a rollout. Projected performance was far in excess of the requirement, with a 225 knot maximum speed, 10,000 foot ceiling, and a 130 mile range with 1,000 pound payload. Okay, now that was just
totally
insane.
unrealistic.
Yeah, that was just insane. They would never get to that point. But it was cool. Look at it hovering right there. I mean, that's pretty damn neat. I don't think anyone can lie about that. That was a cool idea. But I also think that they came up... What was that thing, man? You know, the little army hover pad thing that you would stand on and almost move around like a flying Segway? You know what I mean?
Let me see here real quick. Let's see here. The Army's 1950s hovercraft. Let's see what it was called.
No, it had like the giant propellers below it, and you would move it around, and it had like a railing around it. And they used them in Johnny Quest endlessly. Like, they loved them in Johnny Quest. Like, every bad guy had one of these things.
So, look up the flying shoes. I think that's what it's called.
Flying shoes. That doesn't... let me go type this up out of Wikipedia really quickly. Hang on, everyone. Flying shoes. I see a lot of shoe brands. I'm gonna pull up the Army flying platform. Maybe that's what it's called. Oh, I found it. Actually, it's called the Pawnee. Dude, I found it, man. I actually found it pulling that up. So here we go.
It's called the Pontiac?
It's the Hiller VZ-1 Pawnee. And it was this thing.
Oh my God, man, that looks like that looks like a death trap.
It was a dangerous death trap, but they were still pretty cool. And they used these things. Let's see, flying platform, Johnny Quest. I'll show you it in Johnny Quest. Oh, here we go, man. They had them in Johnny Quest. No joke, man. Here's a still from Johnny Quest right there, and there they are using them.
Oh, yeah, they sure did.
Yeah, that's what I remember them from, because I was always like, wow, what are those? And I finally found them one day, and I was like, oh, they're those. They're those things. Those are supposed to be Pawnees. But they're like more upgraded Pawnees. But still, that is really cool to think that back then they were like, man, everyone's going to be flying around on these things in the future. It was deemed unsafe and uneconomical, and they got rid of them. That was the honest, like, reality of it. But we also tried to create some jetpacks at a point, which worked for a little bit. Let me see if I can go find those.
We've got them now, though, for real. Like, the U.S. Army actually has some.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, like, those early jetpacks from, like, the Vietnam and like, pre-Vietnam era. Let's see. U.S. Army jetpack history. Let me see if I can pull that up. Let's see. Let's see here. Jump belt. I think it was the jump belt. Yeah. Let's see here. Here, we got some stuff here. The Bell rocket belt. I think this is the one I'm talking about. And this was like the first attempt at a jetpack. I think it only had a 30 yeah, the fuel needed for 21 seconds of flight time did not impress the Army. This thing had a very short flight time of less than half a minute. But here is the guy using it. So we actually did have jetpacks back in the day, it's just that they didn't last long. They only lasted for like half a minute. But still, it was pretty cool that we actually had jetpacks at the time. And I think they made a mock-up video showing how it worked. Let me see if I can go pull that up. Let's see, the Bell rocket belt. Let's see, the Bell rocket belt. And let me see if I can find this here. Oh, dang, they had it in the Super Bowl?
In the Super Bowl?
Dude, that is actually incredibly cool. They actually used this thing in the Super Bowl. I can't believe that. I remember them shooting rockets off of the thing at some point in one of the test videos, but check this out. This is actually them using... I'm going to mute that. But this is the guy actually using it at the Super Bowl at some point. I don't know what year this was. But that is incredibly cool, man. Like, they actually showed the public that it worked.
That looks sketchy as hell. Like, it looks cool.
I'm not gonna lie, that is
neat.
pretty damn cool.
Why does it look like it's on a wire or something, though? Like, I'm not trying to call it a hoax, but it looks a little odd.
Maybe it was. I would highly doubt that, though, man. They have to have, like, a whole rig over the Super Bowl for that to work, and everyone would have seen it. But still, that is really cool that they had that. Anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well, at least the best I can. And thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running and allowing us to go down a really interesting rabbit hole of attempted military technology tests that really put the Germans to shame. But still, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to John McKinnon, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, John, for that support as well. John says, would you agree that it's time the international community forces these shady Russian Shadow Fleet vessels to be inspected and deemed seaworthy or safe to avoid what I've said were inevitable environmental disasters?
And thank you so much for the support. Unfortunately, there's no international maritime safety board that could force a test like that. That's something that has to be done on a national basis, which means that the Russian Federation is the only one responsible for making sure that those vessels are seaworthy. Beyond that, I can't really say that that would be something that we could do. Otherwise, we would be imposing sovereignty of another country on their vessels, which would most likely be an act of war. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Unfortunately, there really is no workaround for that, unless we wanted to try and create some economic sanctions that made it impossible for the shadow vessels to work as well. Also, if y'all are hearing any pauses, that might not be lag, that might just be me taking a moment to gather my thoughts or take a breath or something like that. But with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for the support, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to John Bernard, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, John Bernard, for that support. And I did see that he said in the live chat that it had already been addressed. So get a live chat question instead. And we shall, John. And thank you very much once again for that support. And the live chat question here is going to go to the Sunken Grave, who says, is it confirmed that Russians are burning off oh goodness, actually I cannot read that one. That one is too graphic right there. So I will have to actually skip that one and move on to a different one, which goes to Chesty Puller, who said, what is the typical response to countries like Russia and North Korea teaming up to annex land in another?
Usually diplomatic condemnation, because beyond that, if we go into a conventional war, we could risk a nuclear conflict, which is generally considered undesirable by many. And so with that, I hope that does answer that live chat well, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Before we do, someone said, the channel is lag heavy. Let's listen. Beyond that, if we go into a conventional war, we could risk a nuclear conflict, which is generally considered undesirable by many. And so with that, I hope that does answer that live chat well, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Before we do, someone said, the channel is lag heavy. Let's listen. Beyond that, if we go into a conventional war, doesn't sound like it, at least from what I could hear, because that's actually the stream live on the side while we're running it right here. And so I hope that does address that well. It doesn't appear that there's lag on our end. It might be on YouTube's end when y'all are receiving the stream. So if that's so, refresh the stream and hopefully that'll fix it. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to John Bartley, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, John Bartley, this time for that $20 support. And John says, Enforcers, maybe you need new chairs. It's the new thing for YouTubers to ask their audience for, ... Or maybe ask for coffee, or forbid hot dogs. And Matthew knows what I mean, LOL. And yes, I do know what you mean, John. I know about some people grifting for some chairs and some desks and some free trips. I'm actually very familiar with that. I've seen a fellow like that, and he's a troublesome fellow, a very troubled individual that can't quit smoking a little bit of weed from time to time. But what we say, call him the Fly, we call him the Hot Dog Man. He's got many different names, but he's still the same loser. But Enforcer, what say you?
Aw, man. I just put out a brand new stream that literally just says Crazy News Day. It doesn't even tell you what it is. Aw, man. Had a massive crowd of 200 people. Aw, man. Time to get some new chairs before every single member of my audience departs from me. Aw, man. Aw, man. And I completely get what you mean, John Bartley. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here making this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to laugh at people asking their community for chairs. Because that does seem like the new thing, to ask for chairs. And I'm like, why? Like, why not just run an interesting enough channel that people enjoy you enough to support your channel? And if you need a chair, you don't fundraise for it and make them feel like douchebags if they don't give you money. Just work really hard where people enjoy your channel enough to where you can save enough money to buy a chair. Why are you going out of your way to harass your viewers for a chair and a standing desk? That just looks tacky, and that really is a tacky person. Because
oh man, because my back, oh my back, oh my god. I need an expensive chair for my back. Also, I need a standing desk too for my back.
Oh, and by the way, I totally don't mean to share this with y'all, but I'm gonna be spending the night with a Ukrainian refugee before I go to a Christmas party. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Absolutely nothing is going to happen. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You get what I mean.
And also, my back's hurting so much. While I need this nice ergonomic chair and ergonomic desk, I need to take an ergonomic trip to DC with my hurt back. Oh my god.
Oh man, you know what's funny, man? You know what's funny? Is that I actually, for some reason, I was talking about something. I was showing someone something out there about YouTube. It was some folks that I know that are actually currently serving in the military, and I was sitting there and he popped up somehow somewhere, Matthew, and I said, "Oh look, it's the Hot Dog Man," and they were like, "No, wait a minute, what's up with this guy?" And then I told them a little bit of the story, and then they sat there and said, "Well, what did he do in the Army?" I said, "Yeah, he was like a truck driver or something." He was like, "Wait a minute, like it was like 92 Alpha or 88 Mike, whatever it was."
Mike.
Yeah, it was 88 Mike. And then they said, poser. And I was like, oh, I was like, oh, I was like, oh no.
I know anybody I know that's in the military is like, look, like obviously you served and stuff like that, but you're not like infantry or something like that. You're not out there like slogging it out on the front lines or something like that, or out there getting in the middle of danger. You're driving the truck, dudes. Like don't act too hard.
Man, I got such a laugh out of that, because it was so funny to hear people who are currently serving right now, Space Force, Marines, all that, call someone a poser. Like, they all came together, combined, people working in cubicles, and quite literally people in Marine expeditionary units, all combined calling someone a poser. I just found that to be the funniest thing ever. And also they got a huge kick, Matthew, out of the gaming channel AI picture that he puts on every thumbnail that makes him look like a super chiseled Chad. That was like, they got laughs for days out of that one. That one was a good one. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much for the support, John Bartley, and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, John Bartley, we've never asked, like you said, I agree with you, we've never asked for super chat support. We thank everyone who supports, and of course it's important to helping this channel to keep on running. But if people want to support the channel, they can. We're not going to harass people. That's why we don't do channel memberships either, because we don't want to like plaster in people's faces, hey, give us money. I feel like that's really tacky. Like, if people enjoy it enough, they'll go out of their way to support the channel, and if they don't enjoy it that much, then we shouldn't be on air. I mean, that's the way I look at it. If we're an enjoyable channel, people will support it to where we can do this as a job. If we suck at our job, we don't make any income at that point, and we go to the wayside. That's how it is. I'm not going to like, and like, that's something that guy doesn't get. He sucks at his job. No one wants to support him. People are kind of looking through his act at this point and seeing what he's about, which is about himself. He's a narcissist. And people are starting to go away. And so now he's going to get his remaining viewers because his channel is failing, and he's going to try and bully them to give him money for a chair and a standing desk, which honestly will not be used for either of those things probably, and something else entirely different. But still, thank you once again for the support, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Master HWC, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Master HWC, for that support. He said, what's your opinion on Manchuria? And do you think it may impact Russia against China eventually?
And I thank you for the support. I don't think Manchuria is really weighing in that much, or I guess you could call it Greater Manchuria, which is generally what the area, including Vladivostok and pretty much all the way up into this area is called. This is really Greater Manchuria. We don't believe that that's actually going to be weighing in too much because the People's Republic of China actually doesn't consider that a part of their land. The Republic of China considers that to be a part of their land, which is Taiwan. However, Taiwan's in no position to really press that claim at the point, and China doesn't have that as their claims. They have some small islands within the Amur River as their claims at the moment, but we generally do not believe that they're going to be creating any sort of a larger conflict to claim pretty much empty, desolate islands in the middle of a river. So at this point, I'm largely betting on and putting my money on this probably won't have any impact in between Chinese-Russian relations or Sino-Russian relations, if you want to call it technically, and we'll probably see that the Russians continue to get entrenched into the Chinese sphere so much that eventually they just peacefully hand over the islands and just call it that. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Hunter, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Hunter, for that support. And he said very simply, LSA.
Hey, an LSA, Hunter, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to another channel legend. It's Wilness LSA Latvia, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Wilness, for that support once again. Also, it's good to see you. He said, hello, Enforcers, and good evening, USA. Good morning, Europe. And thanks you, Enforcers, for your great work. And thank you very much, Wilness, for the kind words. I appreciate it.
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say, it's good to hear from you again, our favorite hoof trimmer from Latvia. It's wonderful to know that you're still here and watching. I got to thank you so much for the kind words and supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would have never been able to make it to this point, and we wouldn't be able to continue to run this stream 1,028 days in. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address it incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to M&M, who puts in a 10. And they did not leave a comment. But thank you very much, M&M, for that support and helping to keep the channel running.
Is there a candy called that?
I believe there is. It's M&M. I'm not sure what the M stands for.
Didn't they have that oddly, like, sexualized, like, green M&M thing at some point?
Did they? What was that?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, look. See, I don't know what it is, but they sexualized a green M&M. I don't know why, but they did it, and I'm always perplexed as that. It's like it's a candy. Why in the world is there any sex appeal to this green M&M? I have no clue.
And candy's getting freaky.
Yeah, I mean, really, it is. It's like, what's the point? Like every other M&M, it's just chill. Look, you know, they're just M&Ms, you know, and then for some reason, like on the original, it looks like they finally changed it right over here. But now they've sexualized. Wait a minute. They didn't just sexualize the green M&M. They took away some sex appeal on that and then added it to the brown M&M. What's up with this? Like, it's just candy. What's up with this kind of a marketing trick? I don't get it. But anyways, beyond that, however,
you know, each of the M&M characters have their own little like thing going on. Like the yellow one is kind of aloof. The red one is angry. The orange one is panic. The brown one here is kind of like attitude or something like that. The blue one is a little bit like sauce. And the green one is just the green one.
Bro, the blue one has a restraining order where he can't go within 500 feet of a school. Like, I would promise you with a look like that, he's got to. Like, there's no way. But also, someone said, sex sells. Not with M&Ms. Like, who in the world goes, yeah, I'm really feeling it. Yes, I'm going to buy a pack of M&Ms. Like, no one. No one's ever done that. Why in the world is that the selling point for an M&M? Like, I would just be like, it's good. It tastes good. Like, it's not like you're going to get laid by an M&M. So what's the point of them making this like their marketing material? I don't know.
Oh no, we got simping going on for the green M&M. Come on now, I thought we were going to devolve into
Okay.
this. Someone says she a baddie though. LMAO.
Hold on.
No, come on now.
I'm sitting here saying, I was like, dude, there's no way that this actually works. And then they said that. I'm like, oh, never mind. Actually, this is probably a good business tactic. But anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us to get on into the next one. But still, thank you once again for support, M&M, and I hope that was a fun rabbit hole.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here goes to Jedi Squirrel, who puts in a 10. And huge shout out to Jedi Squirrel for that support. They said, with all these Russian generals being transformed into Bologna Mist, I hope our generals are watching closely. Great show, guys, and your knowledge and passion on the streams. It's great, and carry on the good work. And thank you very much, Jedi Squirrel. That's very kind of you. I appreciate it.
And thank you so much for the kind words. And also, thank you for wanting us to keep up the energy. I really feel like I've been keeping it up a lot tonight, probably because my heart's about to explode from the amount of caffeine I took in. My heart is probably pumping to the max. By the way, y'all, did y'all know that the heart as a muscle actually can unroll? Like, it's not like a solid block. It's actually like a... It's kind of weird. I wish I could show y'all on stream, but I actually found this out recently. Apparently, the heart is like a muscle that's wrapped around itself, Matthew, and you can actually unravel the thing.
It's striatic tissue.
No. Like, man, I wish I could show it on stream. But no, like, imagine a carpet, right? You know, like laid out on the floor.
Yes.
Now roll it up into a roll. That's pretty much what the heart is as a muscle.
Yes, indeed.
I did not know that, and that was news to me when I saw that, like in a because I was watching stuff recently, just to let y'all know with the context here, and I was watching a kind of like a part of a I guess you could say it was a dissection of a cadaver, which was kind of interesting. Every once in a while, I kind of get interested in that stuff, and I'm like, oh, well, how does the body work? And they actually put the heart out on a table, and they just unrolled the thing like it was a carpet. And I was like, that freaked me out for one, because I always thought that the heart was a bit more of like a solid block kind of a thing, you know, like it was like a solid object. But apparently it's just a muscle that's pretty much bound around itself, which I had no clue. I did not know that, and that kind of weirded me out a little bit. But still, it's an interesting fact, I suppose, of anatomy. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, speaking of anatomy kind of things. But beyond that, hopefully our generals are watching, and hopefully our generals are also taking proper security measures, which they generally do, because the United States doesn't half-ass things like the Russians do. When we half-ass things, we half-ass things with purpose. They just half-ass everything. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. Thank you once again for the support, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Herp Derp NV, who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Herp Derp, for that support. He said, I just visited the battleship Alabama in Mobile while driving through Alabama. Oh, very good.
Oh, cool.
We've been there before as well. He said, it was great, but probably would have not walked around the east side of downtown. Oh, my God. After dark, if I'd known the crime rate before. Herp Derp, I'm glad you made it, buddy. I'm glad you made it. And that was an interesting place to go walking around downtown after dark right there. I'm glad you made it through. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, he was driving out of Mobile, listening to the gunshots ring, and he was like, "Let me check the crime rate around here." Like, it's like, man, I've got to tell you, I don't know how you survived that one. I honestly am shocked, because East Mobile is a very, very nasty kind of a place. Kind of generally the downtown of every Alabama city is a nasty place, but that is really bad around here. But one thing we do love is that the tallest building in Alabama is actually a state-owned building. I believe it's not the Battle House, it's the RSA Tower right behind the Battle House right here. This is the tallest building in Alabama. Right here, the RSA building, which is the Retirement Systems of Alabama building, built generously by the Alabama taxpayer, which was then discovered a little while later, and I believe that governor got arrested or he resigned. I forgot which one it was, but I think didn't one of those prisoners serve prison time? I mean, one of those governors serve prison time?
I'm sure one of them have along the line, probably.
Yeah, we always have great governors here in Alabama, but beyond that, yeah, I'm shocked you walked around there. You're probably looking around at like the scarred, battle-charred streets of Mobile, wondering what's happened around here. And the simple answer is Alabama stuff. But beyond that, the USS Alabama is incredibly cool. I believe it's one of the few, I think it is the only surviving ship of its class, if I remember correctly, which is the I think it's the South Dakota class, if I'm correct, but it is a wonderful battleship to see. Not as big as an Iowa, but actually has the same firepower as an Iowa, interesting enough. It has 9 16-inch guns, which is the exact same amount of firepower that an Iowa class battleship has. So pretty punchy, but in a smaller package. Still, it's incredibly cool. It's an open museum, and also they have the USS Drum nearby, which is I believe it's a Gato class submarine, which you can go and check out. Would not check out this boat, literally waste of time. It's like some sort of a small river patrol boat or something like that. But anyways, let me see if I can get you some interior pictures here of the ship. Because it is really cool on the inside. They preserved at least the public areas pretty well. I think some of the stuff, though, that isn't in the public view is kind of falling apart in this ship because the state of Alabama puts no money into its historic sites at all, which is very annoying. They'll put money into a prison, not into the preservation of historic sites, though. I cannot find a picture of the interior, though. Do they, like, ban photography of the interior? Because I remember we took pictures on the inside when we were there, like, when we were kids. Let's see. I mean, they don't have a lot of pictures of the inside or any at all. Oh, was that one? Nope. Well, gee. Well, I be dipped. I don't think they have any. I'm going to just keep saying I'll be dipped until we eventually see one, but I don't think there's any. Well, folks, I be dipped. I think I'm going to have to give up on that one, and we're just going to give up right there so I don't keep looking. But still, I hope you had a fun time looking at that because it's a really neat museum and a site. There's a couple like that, and also the aircraft pavilion at the museum is also really cool. We have a saber dog.
A saber dog?
Yeah, it's the F-86 Sabre, but with the big nose to fit the radar, so they called it a saber dog.
And they literally wrote F you on the front of it.
Man, dude, the North Koreans are like, what is this? F you, man. That's what we're like.
993 times.
that's as many times as the North Koreans cussed when they finally found out that the Sabres have been equipped with radars. Like that, like F, like it's like that just over and over. But also we have a Prowler. This is also known as let's see. EDP 445 or Diddy, but this was the Prowler right here. Pretty cool plane. Used in Navy service. We also have a Red Tails P-51D. I believe all the Red Tails P-51s were C models though, not D models. But let's see here. We have a Sea King utility well, not a Sea King, sorry, this is another helicopter, but this is the utility helicopter on board most U.S. destroyers and cruisers during the 1960s to the 80s, used for all kinds of stuff. This one actually still has the dip right there, the little sonar buoy dip. I don't think they actually dropped it into the water, though. I think that one they just kind of like pulled above the water surface, but still, really cool place. And I got to thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to none other than Tom Exman, a channel legend who puts in $20 donation. And thank you very much, Tom, for the $20 support. He said, "Jeez, let's help Andrew buy a new computer or upgrade." And guess what, Tom? Guess what?
It's on
Unlike
the way.
the hot dog man, it's already on the way. The enforcer already bought it with his own money, and not the money that he had to beg for and grift for, like the hot dog man's doing. So it's already taken care of, like the way it should be taken care of, instead of the way the hot dog man is doing it. But enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Tom Exman. And just like Matthew said, it's already on the way. What's crazy about that is that, unlike Hot Dog Man, who constantly begs his viewers for money because he feels like he's owed it, I work really hard and save really long, thanks to support like yours, Tom Exman, to be able to eventually replace ailing computer technology used to run this business, so that way we can continue to deliver the news to all of y'all. And none of y'all knew about it at all. We were going to tell y'all about it once the computer was installed, but considering that you brought it up now, it's like, we might as well tell y'all. But it's already on the way. It'll be here on the 21st of December, and then we're going to go through the process of transferring everything over that's critical for business function onto the new computer, and then it'll finally be brought on air probably about a week later after that, probably on the next Monday, well, the next Tuesday after that. But still, we cannot wait. We are so excited for it because this computer is truly the cat's meow and should not have any issues with running a stream. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well, Tom Exman, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't have been able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't have been able to save up long enough to be able to get a computer like that. And so with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Logan Emke, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Logan, for the support. He said, "That was a big kaboom this morning with the scooter."
I got to tell you, those drive-by scootings are pretty explosive, but still, thank you so much once again. for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I'd certainly agree. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Darren Quinn, who puts in a 10 and says, ecological war declared by Putsky, sinking these oil ships 3 in as many days. Nature has declared war upon Ruski, so they are bliat 120%.
I would agree with you completely on that. The Russians are really paying greatly on the high seas thanks to their stupidity and incompetence at large. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Master HWC, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Master HWC. He said, hi from the UK, and I'm an hour late, so I'm not updated with the ins and outs because it's 4 a.m. here. And damn, that is early in the morning. I said, but how do you personally think the recent elimination will impact the current conflict?
I don't think it'll impact it that much. I think it's more so trying to instill fear in the Russian general staff and maybe strike fear at the very core of the Russian central government to make them consider a peace arrangement a lot better, but also not directly attack any key people that really are involved with the war's continuance day by day, so that way they'll still be alive to have the fear instilled in them to take peace talks seriously. That may be the impact. I think that's what they're looking for at this point, and that's generally my takeaway from it. So with that, I thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one right here goes to Corsair F4U, who puts in a 10 once again. And thank you very much, Corsair, for the support once again. It's a great answer, and LSA. And I'm glad it was a great answer, by the way. Sadly, I would go much more deep into it, kind of like the last question you put in. But, you know, when you get into political science stuff, you can't help but give examples that get political to prove the point, or at least that's easy for me to explain it that way. So I try to avoid that, but I hope that my answer was decently well. And also the Enforcer followed up with his own version of it as well. So I'm glad to hear it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support as well. And also, I would have to certainly agree that it's very hard to get into that without giving political examples. And the problem with the political examples is that while we would be talking about them in a clinical perspective, only talking about the applications of it, a lot of people are really knee-jerk when it comes to American politics and just cannot listen to anything. Like, for example, saying just the name of a president can get people pissed off, like royally pissed. You know, like, hell, I can actually give you an example right here. If I said the name of the current sitting president or the president that's coming in, regardless of the context, even if I'm just mentioning them like Matthew would have in a political science perspective of explaining how the government works, people would be saying stupid stuff in the chat, and then people would disagree with that, and then they'd start cussing them out, and then they cuss them back out, you know, the people who originally said that, and then it just evolves into a brawl for no reason, just because their names were mentioned. That's why we don't mention their names. And then even not mentioning their names is an issue for some people, because some people worship these folks, and I hate to tell y'all, but these people don't even know who the hell y'all are, and regardless of which one you support, if you were to be sitting there cold and dying on the street, they would give a damn. They don't even know who you are. So just putting that out there, you know, don't drink the Kool-Aid too much, because, you know, while it's great to be an American patriot and everything, these people don't even know who the hell you are or really care about you that much. So don't worship them, because they could give a damn about you. But moving on from that, some people get pissed off I won't even mention their name. Like, I'll say the president-elect or the president of the United States, and then someone would go, why don't you mention their name, asshole? And I'm like, well, because I don't get political, and one, that's really rude. But anyways, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you once again for support. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to John Brewer, who puts in a $20 donation. That's his 5th ever super chat on a live stream. And thank you very much, John, for the support. We appreciate it. And John says, it's very simply, take a question from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, John Brewer, your 5th super chat ever. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to take one from the chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so this one is going to go to, let's see here, Outdoors Marva, who brings this topic back to our attention once again. They said, any upcoming news on the New Jersey drone situation?
Yeah, well, I kind of just like droned it out, pun intended. But the government's now saying that the drones are operating lawfully and safely, and, you know, it's all fine, and they're probably just hobbyists. And then someone asked today in the Pentagon press briefing, well, if it's all safe and fine, why are y'all giving classified briefings to the, I think, what was it, Matthew, the House
Foreign Affairs Committee.
Yeah, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and then the Pentagon press secretary said, oh, that's crazy. You might want to ask someone else about that. And then just moved right over the question. So now we don't know what's going on at all. Whatever it is, at this point, I would actually be leaning back towards, again, it's probably something that the government's doing, and they really didn't mean for it to get out into the public and for people to be freaking out about it. So they're just trying to damage control any way they can at this point to keep it on the down low. Really just running static at this point to make the situation so confusing no one can really figure out what it is. Makes the public angry, but on a national security perspective, it probably makes sense. But it's still aggravating for the public to listen to. Matthew's been on Twitter all day, like, they're lying. Like, and I'm like, yeah, but like, what are we gonna do?
Man, they are lying, man. They're lying. They might be lying for a good reason, though. Like, I'm not going to say that they don't have a reason to lie necessarily, but it never looks good when you have a Pentagon spokesperson come out and say, oh, you're just all a bunch of like loonies, like looking up at the sky and stuff like that. There's nothing going on at all. But we'll be holding our classified briefing this afternoon for the Foreign Affairs Committee. It's like, what? It's like, well, apparently something's going on, or why are you holding a classified briefing?
Yeah, well, you know what it is that there's a classified briefing probably telling the Congress, look, this is a national security issue. This is our stuff. No one can keep making a big deal about this, okay, because you're only going to, further fuel public interest in it. Someone's eventually going to blow the lid on it, and then it's a whole national security issue. That's probably what they're doing at this point. I would assume that they're probably going to get on the phones with the governors, and if the governors start shutting up about it, that's exactly what it was, is that it was something being done by the U.S. government, and it wasn't supposed to get out in the public and have people freaking out. That may be why the navigational lights were on. It still doesn't explain why they're flying over military bases and restricted airspace without notifying those restricted airspaces that they're flying through. Still doesn't make sense on that metric, but it could be something like that. Could be, like we were originally saying, a test of some sort of a system out of Picatinny Arsenal, and they have to test it in open airspace, so they're just using the northeastern region to do that. That may be the answer. But
Well, one thing I think at this point that we can kind of conclude, because we've heard from sources, apparently the U.S. DoD said themselves that none of the drone flights are theirs. It's not part of the Pentagon, and it's also not part of secret government tests either. They can confirm that. And also that would make sense that it wouldn't be the Pentagon, because they are flying directly over active military bases, and they're impeding the flights at military bases. And why would a secret test do that? That wouldn't make much sense. So I think at this point, it's pretty logical to conclude that if these drones are indeed a real threat, then it probably is posed by some foreign adversary, most likely China, I would say. Russia might have the ability to come up with something like this, but I would probably say it's more along the lines with China. Drones are typically their wheelhouse, and this is something they would do. So that could be what it is. It could be Chinese drones being launched either here in the United States domestically or maybe from a ship.
maybe so, but whatever it is, the government's trying to downplay it. I would assume that it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. If something blows up, then we'll have to go back and look at this and be like, oh, it was a big deal. But it's probably nothing that big of a deal, and it's apparently something that they don't really want to touch on too much. I don't know what it is. It's still aggravating, though, to have the government openly, say stuff like that, because it's honestly patronizing and really insulting people's intelligence. But beyond that, it's what they've deemed is necessary at the moment. So we just have to hope and pray that they kind of know what's going on up there, and they're not going to be, allowing something dangerous or unsafe to be flying through America's skies. But we'll just have to see what it is at this point.
Couldn't it be possible that, for example, if it is a Chinese drone, I know a lot of people are saying, like right now in the live chat, why would they have the navigational lights on for everybody to see if they were a threat? And that's what I originally thought as well. That would make sense, that line of logic. But at the same time, though, if you think about it, for example, if it's indeed discovered these are Chinese drones for a fact, and let's say the government already knows that, let's say one of these drones accidentally crosses the path of an aircraft, that aircraft hits it and then crashes and kills everybody on board, and the lights weren't on. That would be probably an act of war by China, actually, that they flew a drone right in front of a commercial airliner, either by accident or on purpose. And by having navigational lights on one, that would prevent that from really being a major issue, because at least if something happened, they could say, oh, well, look, at least we had navigational lights on or something like that. At least they could have a chance to see it. Maybe that might be an idea. That still sounds a little far-fetched, even with that theory. But I'm personally leaning towards the idea it's probably a foreign adversary flying drones over our territory.
I know exactly what it is. They're turning on the navigational lights to avoid collisions because they don't want any of the drones to get hit with anything and crash to where the debris could be recovered. That might be the answer.
It could be. Like, all these are just theories, but there's got to be some reason, because, I mean, if you look at it, you got to rule out the U.S. DoD flying these things, because they wouldn't be interrupting their own airspace. So what does that leave? It leaves foreign adversary or aliens. I'm ruling the alien thing out right now. I'm not buying that. It's most likely China.
I would say I would believe that it is most likely the Chinese as well at this point. But who knows? We'll just have to see, and hopefully the United States is making good calls, although you never know. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to Butchie the Crouton, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Butchie, for that support. I don't see a comment attached to it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that, in my opinion, it most like, well, I have to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I don't even know what I was talking about right there, but I thank you for the support, because while you didn't throw in a comment, the support means a lot and helps us to keep this channel running. And so a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
How about this theory, Enforcer? I got a better theory. I saw Cynical once say in the live chat, navigational lights mean that they are following the law. Now, here's a loophole that we never thought about, because the DoD has said that all the drones flying in our airspace are operating lawfully. Now, what about this? What if the Chinese have figured out that they can actually fly spy missions with these drones over our airspace as long as they comply with U.S. law and do things like that? They can fly them anywhere they want. I mean, what if that's the actual answer?
That would honestly be one of the goofiest but most realistic answers that there probably is that we're like, well, I mean, they're following the FAA regulations. I mean, there's not anything we can do. And then we just let them keep flying. That might be an answer to it, maybe. And if that's the answer, that's just annoying. That's insulting as well. That would be something where the laws need to be changed to not allow that sort of thing to happen, especially when it appears that the drones are being flown by a foreign actor. But anyways, that is an interesting idea, Matthew. A very interesting theory, and might actually be one of the more realistic ones that we've heard at this point. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Richard Philpott, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Richard, for the $10 support. He said, get a couple of those Tootsie Pops.
Hey, thank you for the support. We actually had a couple of Tootsie Pops.
That's weird he mentioned that.
Yeah, that's weird. You mentioned that. What are you, some sort of a fed? Are you an op? Like, but beyond that, we actually had a couple of those. They're pretty good. Did you poison them? You poisoned them, didn't you? But still, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 10. And let's see here. He said, I'm not an apologist for a bad German regime that happened a while back, but in academic fairness, there was a reason why Allies and Soviets were racing to scoop up scientists and tech in Operation Paperclip. No antagonism intended, and LSA.
And I thank you for the support, and there was a bit of a reason, a little bit, but not really, because you'll notice that most of the scientists that we were scooping up were generally rocket scientists, and a lot of the scientists that the Soviets were scooping up were jet engine scientists. Which is kind of interesting, because the MiG-15 actually had a decent amount of Nazi influence on it. Interesting to know. And I see where you're coming from there, and that's true. But generally, we were only trying to scoop up the scientists in the technological fields that we knew might be lacking in. Rocketry for the West was really the one that we wanted to know more about. We had already mastered the jet engine far better, for that fact, than the Germans did. And so we knew that we really didn't need any jet engine or jet aircraft scientists, but we did need rocket scientists, because that was the technological field we weren't really that advanced on. The Soviets wanted jet engine scientists because the Soviet Union actually had not produced a jet aircraft at that point, and then right after the fact, they then produced their first jet aircraft ever, which is the pot-bellied MiG-9, which is ugly as hell. This thing is terrible looking, but this was their first jet aircraft ever. And it was a very interesting kind of a thing. They don't have a lot of pictures of it, but I wanted to show you all the front here, because it had a 37mm cannon in the central nose, and then it had two 23mm under it. These things are terrible. I hate them so much. And in War Thunder, they are like the ugliest and stupidest thing ever. You can kill them so easily, but they're a thing, I suppose. But anyways, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can, because that is true. Yes, we were grabbing up scientists, but it was scientists in only specific scientific categories that we really weren't that advanced in. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address it the best I can, and that is a good point. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 5. He said, I would like to extend my deepest condolences to the family of that scooter. LSA, hit the like button. That's an order.
And thank you so much for the support. And it's so sad. You never know when your scooter is going to just go crazy and become an active scooter. It's crazy. That family didn't even know. But I thank you so much once again for support, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Brick House, who puts in a 5. And also, thank you very much, Brick House, for that support. And also, they're a new viewer, so welcome to the channel as well. They said, good evening to you both. And I know we heard about high DPRK troop casualties, but were they able to capture any villages? And long live the LSA.
No, we didn't hear that they were able to really capture anything. It appears that they got completely repulsed without gaining any ground at all and took pretty high losses in the meantime. And so with that, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, shockingly enough, I put up a poll here. I said, do you think it's likely that the unknown drones over U.S. airspace are Chinese spy drones? Only 41% said yes, and 60% said no. So, very interesting. So, most people don't think that they're Chinese spy drones. So, I would assume that they're sort of going along the lines of the nuclear sniffing theory, that maybe these are operated by the U.S. DoD, and they're looking for that missing nuclear material, perhaps. But maybe so. And also, by the way, I did see the reports of people saying that there was some missing radioactive material in New Jersey reported to the Energy Commission. That say what?
Go ahead. I was just saying New Jersey in a really weird way.
Well, that was just only a small amount of radioactive material. I think it was in a PET scanner for medical reasons and things like that. So it was not like missing a nuclear warhead or something. So it was not anything to really be concerned with. It was really a nothing burger, really. And that was another theory that was debunked, basically, by all the facts. But with that, we are now moving on to our next super chat, which goes to Jose Aguera, who puts in a 5 and says, will Putin end up at The Hague?
Probably not. Even if Russia collapses, he'll most likely just go and live in exile in some friendly country like North Korea or the People's Republic of China, possibly. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I thank you once again for support, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jack Ragnarsson, who puts in a 5 and says, do you think there will ever be a Korean unification? And Hoxha's Albania was just as bad as North Korea, and they eventually became an ally and in NATO.
And that is an interesting question. Albania was really rough off. The thing, though, is that I don't ever think there'll be a reunified Korea, because North Korea will never really be able to successfully attack South Korea and take it. And the other thing is that South Korea doesn't ever want to touch North Korea, because they are so economically bad off. It would create a major refugee crisis if the peninsula was reunified, and it would generally drag the entire economy of South Korea down to pretty much support 26 million people that are dead weight at that point, economically, for South Korea. So I don't really think there ever will be a reunification of the peninsula, at least in the near future. And if there was, it would have to be a very, very slow reintegration where North Korea's communist regime under the Kims collapses. They come forward with some form of an interim government that opens itself up to the Western world, makes itself a little bit more democratic, and then slowly begins the transition progress to build up itself economically so that way it's stable enough to reform with South Korea. Or they may create some sort of a federation system where North and South Korea maintain some autonomy, but they're both unified under some form of a centralized confederation form of a government. Maybe. But I just don't really see any way for them to just wholly reunify into one solid country without completely focusing on the major economic disparities in between North and South Korea in the current day. But still, I thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 5 as well and says the IDF has said it will maintain a permanent buffer zone in Syria. And is this just a pretext to have a base to invade if Syria reverts back to civil war?
I don't really know. Did the Israelis actually say that today, Matthew?
Yeah, the IDF said they will be staying in the buffer zone into the immediate future.
Oh, well, that's interesting. It's kind of a little different than what they said initially. But anyways, I suppose what they're doing is right and justified no matter what. I mean, they could say that they're just going to invade all Syria. I'm sure that'll be fine, as some people would like us to say. But beyond that, I would say maybe that's the reason why. I wouldn't really know, to be entirely honest. What the Israelis are doing in Syria is a complete mystery to me at this point. And so with that, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Plazoth, who puts in a 4 and says coffee fund.
Hey, thank you so much for the support, Plazoth, and helping us to keep the coffee fund flowing. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Dean London, who puts in a 2 and says half float the boat, LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting. We gotta float that boat, you know. And thank you once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got a 2 from Marc-Andre Brunette, who puts in that 2, of course. And thank you very much, Mark, for the support as well. And also, we have a 1 from Dustin Mayo, who says, is Russia reaffirming to take Alaska back for the 3rd time?
I think that I heard that. I like zoned that out as background noise. I don't even really care if they say that. It's like, come and take it. Then I'm sure you won't. So I think they have, but it doesn't have any impact really on anything. But still, I thank you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that, folks, it is now time to move in to our live chat questions because we're fresh out of super chat questions. So once again, to everybody that donated, thank you very much for supporting the channel. And to everybody else that didn't donate, thank you for simply being a viewer and smash the like button. But with that, we are now jumping into our Morse code decoders of the night. And tonight we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Her Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. They said the Morse code for today reads, so about Ukraine is Russian to win the war, but tis, LLT, LSA.
And ding, ding, that is the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message. I got to congratulate y'all on getting that correct on the 1028th day of the war, because y'all continue to get that correct time and time again. And always let the LSA know the Morse code message of the night, including myself, because by this point I usually forget it. But with that, it is time for us to move on into the last 3 questions of the night. They're going to be live chats, of course, but sadly, due to time constraints, we'll only be able to take 3, no more, no less. And so with that, we are on to the 3rd to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to Chesty Puller, who says, who is the best candidate to send troops in to help Ukraine against the Koreans?
Probably Poland or France. That would be my bet, because they wouldn't be that escalatory, at least initially, but they still have pack-a-punch armies for the large part. And so I hope that answers that well. And with that, we are on to the 2nd to last question of the night.
All right, and this one goes to, I'm going to actually say this question, but I'm going to have to reword it because it's a little bit graphic, but it is a question that I've seen many people asking, actually. They said, have you heard that Russian soldiers are apparently messing with the identities of the North Korean soldiers, the corpses, to hide their identity as Korean?
I had not heard that, at least at the moment. I haven't seen any video or picture proof of that yet. But I've heard the rumors circling around. However, we can never really confirm those kinds of rumors unless if I physically see it with my own eyes. And at the moment, I have not seen it yet to be able to confirm that. So at the moment, it's Schrodinger's mutilation. We don't really know if it's going on or not. Not to make that a joke, but that's quite honestly the case. I don't know if it's going on or not. It might be going on, but I haven't seen any proof to confirm it yet. But anyways, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this viewer is AF Kaplan, who said, after the death of this general, the one here in Moscow, do you think Ukraine's SBU will go after more senior targets in Russia's government or stick with other military personnel?
I'm doubting it, at least for now. I think they're going to be going for more military personnel. Because you see, the people they're picking to take out are in Moscow, but they're not incredibly important people. Deputy directors, the general of nuclear, biological, and chemical defense forces. They're not people who are actually wildly important to the daily carrying on of the war. They're trying to keep those people around, but they're also trying to strike fear into them, pretty much terrorism of a form, but on the Russian higher-ups. So that way they get so scared and terrified of that being them, because the SBU seems to be able to get anywhere and everywhere at this point, that they decide to end the war to save their own skin. If this doesn't really seem to rattle them too much as time goes by, we may see that higher officials are targeted, but I have a feeling that the number of targeted and also the chance of them being targeted is fairly low in number for both of those answers. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, from what I know. And with that, we've reached the end of tonight's stream, and I gotta thank all of you once again for watching. We reached a peak viewership tonight of 10,700 people, and have had about 70,000 people watch from beginning to end. We are entirely honored and appreciative to have each and every single one of y'all here. And if y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to hit that like button, comment, and subscribe, because we love to have y'all here. And of course, welcome to the Leaf Spring Army. And with that, good night. Good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Leaf Spring Army. And with that, the Leaf Spring Army will never die. Good night, take care, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time.
All right, and good night to you all, folks, once again, and thank you all for another great stream once again tonight. It was a very good stream with a lot of news to cover, and I'm sure tomorrow will be no exception because it looks like the news is ramping up once again because things are getting a little bit spicy around Christmas time. But with that, thank you all once again, and of course, Slav Ukraine, Heroem Slava. We'll see you all tomorrow night on the stream and also midday for the video. And with that, good night.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.